Chapter 28:17. The academic discussion did not go too far. Then, they prepared to land on the island. There were also some intentional accidents. For example, something was pulled down, causing Lane to fly into a rage. Another example would be some non-standard operations. While certain someone was cursing out loud, he would also teach them about standard operations. The first episode of The Lost Civilization stopped there. There were also some scenes that weren't reshoots. They were completely fake. Chun Zhao had overestimated Falui Lysander's professional ethics. In order to be mysterious, they purposely created some abnormal scenes. For example, when their ship was about to set sail, the engines suddenly caught fire and they quickly evacuated the ship. In fact, it was very smooth when they set sail. They didn't encounter any problems during the voyage, except for the native guide. Moreover, they had also taken a few more photos, including finding the native guide again. Anyway, it was all about being mysterious to the extreme. When they reached Gongdu Island, the earthquake was supposed to happen an hour after they landed. But after some reshoots and editing, they brought the earthquake forward. When they landed on the island, there was an earthquake immediately. Then, there were startled birds and abnormal winds. Then, there was the native guide's warning to them. It was a warning from God. Then, there was the scene where he was scared away. The first episode ended there. One had to admit that if Falui Lysander went to Hollywood to film a horror movie, the effect would definitely be good. At least, he was an expert in creating an atmosphere. It left enough suspense, and, at the same time, created a strange and bizarre atmosphere. Finally, after the subtitles, there was another sentence. This show is completely real. There is no fiction. This sentence was amazing. The audience would just treat it as a story. In fact, some shows would pretend to be exploration shows. Then, they would arrange some supernatural scenes to attract attention. However, that kind of specious supernatural experience was obviously incomparable to Lost Civilization. Let's not talk about the reshoots first. Just the actual earthquake, the flock of startled birds, and the abnormal wind direction that came without warning gave the audience a different feeling. Mr. Chun, congratulations. This is unbelievable. Do you know what our ratings are tonight? Scully called, and his tone was filled with surprise. At the moment, Chun Zhao had just finished watching The Lost Civilization. However, he didn't look too excited. To be precise, he wasn't very happy at the moment, because Falui Lysander didn't do as he asked. Chun Zhao wanted the first episode to have content that clearly pointed to ancient Greek civilization. However, Chun Zhao didn't see anything about this from the beginning to the end. Did Chun Zhao expect those gangsters to be familiar with ancient Greek culture and guess that it was ancient Greece from the bits and pieces of the show? Chun Zhao didn't care about the ratings. He didn't care about profits or losses. He didn't even care what else was going to happen next. He wouldn't care even if the show stopped after these 3 episodes. Chun Zhao had invested in Lost Civilization. The goal was to lure Milo Tanzik Williams and his men out. In the end, Milo Tanzik Williams was not lured out. The ratings were surprisingly high. The highest number of views reached 5.8 million. At the same time, it has a 75% market share in California. Scully didn't hear Chun Zhao's reply. He thought that Chun Zhao was feeling the same way he was. Therefore, he said to himself, now, there are already 2 TV stations that are part of the top 5 that hope to import Lost Civilization. Mr. Chun, do you need me to talk to them? I'm very experienced in this field. No need. Chun Zhao's face darkened. I'm tired. That's all. With that, Chun Zhao hung up. On the other end, Scully was stunned. What happened? Why did he feel that the Chinese guy was unhappy? Did he say something wrong? Scully thought back, but he really didn't know how he'd offended Chun Zhao. When he called again, he realized that the line was busy. After hanging up, Chun Zhao called Falui Lysander. Mr. Lysander. Mr. Chun, hello. Did you watch tonight's show? What do you think? I'm very dissatisfied, Chun Zhao said directly. You don't seem to have listened to me. What? Mr. Chun, I don't understand. I've said it before. The first episode has to be about ancient Greece. I've already laid the groundwork with some clues that point to this content, but time is limited. I can't directly tell the audience about ancient Greece. This requires a gradual progression of the plot, and I feel that this kind of arrangement will leave more suspense and attract more viewers. I don't want to attract more viewers. I don't need this show to make money. I have my own requirements. If you can't meet them, then you're not qualified. Chen Zhao's words were extremely harsh. He rarely got so angry at someone. You better understand one thing. I'm the boss. I don't want this to happen again. Thankfully, Chen Zhao was still able to control himself. After a few complaints, he softened his tone. Is the second episode's post-production done? Falyu Lysander didn't understand why Chen Zhao was so angry. Judging from the effect of today's broadcast, it should be very good. Scully had also called him earlier. He didn't understand why Chen Zhao was so unhappy. Was it because he didn't absolutely follow Chen Zhao's requirements? To him, Chen Zhao's requirements were very unreasonable and unprofessional. The content about ancient Greece was a gimmick. If it was set up properly, it could cause a sensation. It could even cause an academic sensation in the archaeology world. Then, it could cause a craze for the general audience from the academic world. Then, the show would be pushed to the peak. Not like what Chen Zhao had requested. Just bring out the content about ancient Greece directly. This would reduce the suspense and fun by half. Let me ask you, Chen Zhao asked in a low voice. Is the second episode's content done? Yes. Falyu Lysander didn't understand Chen Zhao's current state at all. When he'd first met Chen Zhao, he thought that Chen Zhao was easy to get along with and had a good temper. Why did it suddenly erupt at this time? Give me the second episode's content first. I need to confirm it. Chapter 28:18. Falyu Lysander was hesitant. If he rejected Chen Zhao now, it would mean that they were going to fall out. It would also mean that he would have to go against Chen Zhao in court. Just then, Falyu Lysander recalled the contents of the three-party contract. The compensation for breach of contract was 15 times the amount of the investment. The investment was 20 million. This meant that if he lost in court, he would have to pay 300 million. He couldn't even pay 3 million, let alone 300 million. In the end, his rationality won over his hesitation. Going against a rich person in court was a very unwise decision. Plus, he'd violated the contract first. He was digging his own grave. In America, if he faced such a huge compensation, it was really possible that his family would break up and he would be deserted. The next day, Falyu Lysander obediently brought the edited sample of the second episode to Chen Zhao's house. When he saw the manor beside Mirror Lake, Falyu Lysander truly felt what it meant to be rich. The mansions he'd seen in the past were like grass sheds in the countryside compared to Mirror Lake Manor. Falyu Lysander was also a rich person, but at the moment, he realized that he was at least a Pacific Ocean away from the truly rich. If he knew that Chen Zhao's income for one day was equivalent to half of his lifetime's worth, who knew what he would think? The most popular saying now was, "Don't use your annual income to challenge my pocket money." Falyu Lysander wasn't just shocked. He was also afraid. When rich people reached a certain level, they'd start playing politics. Politics was a dangerous thing in a society where money reigned supreme. Then, Falyu Lysander entered the manor. This place really opened his eyes. The front yard was already bigger than the total area of his house. There was also a huge grassland in the backyard and the forest beside it. They were also part of the manor. In feng shui terms, it would be mountains and rivers. The east wind welcomed and sent, bringing in wealth and treasures. The green dragon lay down, and the wind and rain adjusted. It wasn't a dragon's vein, but it was still a great place with good feng shui. Of course, Falyu Lysander didn't know feng shui, but he knew that all these things added together would be extremely expensive in Los Angeles, where every inch of land was expensive. When Falyu Lysander saw Chen Zhao didn't give him a good look. Chen Zhao knew Falyu Lysander's request and his starting point. However, Chen Zhao didn't like it when people thought they were right, especially when she ignored his request. This was the dissatisfaction of a consumer towards all the good intentions. "Please take a seat, Mr. Farage." Chen Zhao took the sample and put it in the player. Falyu Lysander looked a little uneasy as he watched the broadcast content that he had personally reviewed. In fact, the sample that was being played this time was edited by him and his team last night. He also added some things, which were what Chun Zhao had requested before the first episode was aired. Actually, the second episode was supposed to be analyzed. However, he would still hold back. But because of Chun Zhao's forceful request and attitude, she couldn't help but cry. Still, he added more content to the story. While watching, Chun Zhao kept his face covered. When the video ended, Chun Zhao's expression softened. Chun Zhao finally smiled. Mr. Falyui, I'm very satisfied with the content of the second episode. I'm sorry for my attitude before. Mr. Chun, you must be joking. You're my boss now. You have the right to request anything from me. I should be the one apologizing. No one knew what Falyui Lysander was thinking. However, at least he gave in on the surface. Going against Chun Zhao head-on wouldn't do him any good. Chun Zhao didn't care if Falyui realized his mistake or not. Chun Zhao would only have a short interaction with Falyui anyway. After the filming of the show, she and he would be people from two different worlds. As long as Falyui could give him what he needed and the result he wanted, it would be fine. The first episode had already been aired. No matter how angry Chun Zhao was, it wouldn't change anything. Shedding all pretense of cordiality with Falyui Lysander would allow him to vent some of his anger. However, it wouldn't change the situation at all. Moreover, his investment and time would be wasted. So, Chun Zhao decided to forgive Falyui Lysander this time. Mr. Chun, I have a question. Is it convenient for you to answer it? What is it? I can't guarantee that I can answer it. Mr. Chun, I think you're a rational person. You should know that the content I arranged is the best choice. Why do you have to solve the mystery of ancient Greece? I said that I'm not investing in this show for profit. You can treat it as interest if you accept this explanation. Of course, if you don't, I won't give you another answer. This answer clearly wasn't the real reason. Of course, Falyui Lysander wasn't satisfied. Chun Zhao had pretty much said, I'm just finding an excuse to brush you off. It didn't matter if you accepted it or not. Fine, Falyui Lysander replied helplessly. Falyui Lysander didn't stay for long. He found an excuse and left. Chun Zhao didn't plan on asking Falyui Lysander to stay for lunch either. Portia, Zephyra, and Navikalina came one after another. Chun Zhao left the kids to his 3 assistants. Then he went out. He'd been back for more than 2 weeks. Chun Zhao had always left Xiao He with Ethan. Before bringing her out, Chun Zhao had said that she wouldn't have anything to do with him anymore. But she was still half on his side. As long as it was within his power, he would help her if he could. West had said that he wanted to interact with her. But then, he said that he would let her live peacefully. There was no need to drag her into trouble. When Chun Zhao arrived at Ethan's motel, he saw Xiao He sitting on the stairs in a daze. Hey, did Ethan kick you out? Chun Zhao teased. Of course, Chun Zhao believed that Ethan wouldn't do that. Ethan valued money as much as his life, but he still had morals. Xiao He raised her head and looked at Chun Zhao. Mr. Chun, how come you're here? Xiao He looked at Chun Zhao listlessly. She'd gotten over her initial unfamiliarity with going abroad. She was basically familiar with the environment and had gone out with Li Qing a few times. Actually, she didn't have much interest in L.A. L.A. was an international metropolis, but it wasn't much better than Shanghai. Right now, she was just lacking in spoken English, but basic communication was fine. I'm here to see an old friend and see if you've been sold. Chapter 28:19. Xiao He didn't react too excitedly to Chun Zhao's joke. She didn't even bother to retort. Instead, she continued sitting on the stairs, holding her chin with a worried expression. Tell me, what's bothering you? Share it with me. I submitted my application to UCLA a few days ago, Xiao He said, frowning. I don't know if I can pass the first round. Her results in China were pretty good, but she really didn't have much confidence in her application this time. She was waiting for a response from UCLA. This process was too torturous for her. Which UCLA campus? LA. When did you submit your application? I'll check for you. 4 days ago. It's March 2nd, right? Chun Zhao took out his phone and called right. Hi, darling. How are you? Not good at all. I recently got C2H6O deficiency syndrome. Chun Zhao froze. Fuck, you just don't have alcohol. You're almost 100 years old. Who dares to let you drink every day. Then I'll send you 2 bottles tomorrow. Say it. What's up? Rai was very decisive. Since she was getting benefits, it was time to get down to business. Chen Zhao definitely wouldn't call her at this time to say hello. Usually, Chen Zhao would only visit her in the afternoon. He would go to school personally. Calling her at this time definitely meant that he had something important to talk about. I have a friend who submitted an application to the school. Can you help me check it out? What do you mean? Just check, or do you want me to let her go? Wright didn't understand Chen Zhao's intentions. If it was just a check and help Chen Zhao's friend pass the first round, it was just a small problem. This was a small problem that could be solved with just a few words. But there was still the interview. The requirements for the interview were much higher. Under normal circumstances, the requirements for UCLA's LA campus weren't as simple as being excellent in both academics and conduct. Being excellent in both academics and conduct was just the basic requirement. If Wright wanted to use her connections, she could pass no matter what the results were. But the prerequisite was that Chen Zhao had to sponsor some money. I just want to give her an interview. Chen Zhao didn't plan on helping Xiao He get in directly. If she just wanted to waste time, it didn't matter where she went. Staying in Ethan's motel and doing nothing was the same as staying in the dorms. If she really had the ability, then she would rely on her own ability to pass the interview. That was also her ability. Sure, what's your name? Yi. Chen Zhao turned around and looked at Xiao He. How old are you? After graduating from Jiaodong University, I applied for the Department of Construction Engineering. 21, Xiao He replied. Chen Zhao then told them about Xiao He's basic information. The application was submitted on March 3rd. All right, I'll take a look and arrange an interview for her as soon as possible. After thanking him, Chen Zhao hung up and turned to look at Xiao He. Okay, get ready. There should be a notification in 2 days, Chen Zhao said. You better be at your best. Xiao He was naturally very grateful to Chen Zhao, but what followed was even greater panic. After all, the application was just waiting, and the interview would be more challenging. If she really had a fearless mentality, she wouldn't have been so anxious when she was applying. The interview was obviously an even harsher test. The interview did not only consist of an oral question, but also a written test. Whistling, Chen Zhao entered the hotel. He saw Li Qing sitting at the counter. Andy Li, where's that fatty Ethan? He went out, Li Qing said. Chen Zhao, after you took Xiao He away for a few days, a few unfamiliar faces appeared nearby. They're all Chinese. They're probably here for Xiao He. Huh? Chen Zhao raised an eyebrow. Xiao He's domestic enemies are all here? I think so. Auntie Li, are you sure they're here to kill Xiao He? They're not here to kill you. I know my own family. I have a few heartless relatives, but they won't go to such great lengths to come all the way here to kill me. But I'm not sure about Xiao He. Why not? Her family has already been destroyed. They don't have to kill her, right? They might not be here to kill her, Li Qing said. Li Qing said, it's possible that she took something from the God-refining sect. It could be a magic treasure or a cultivation technique. Li Qing had asked Chen Zhao to take Xiao He away mainly because she wasn't confident that she could protect her. Okay, I got it. Chen Zhao took out his phone and dialed West's number. West, your little princess is being watched. What? What happened? West had wanted to meet Xiao He before, but after some consideration, he didn't want to disturb Xiao He's normal life. That was why he didn't show up. In the end, his idea had just been implemented. Xiao He had gotten involved in the conflict of the spiritual world again. Chen Zhao didn't plan on interfering. Not long after, someone came outside. It was Nagasaka Reiko from the Supernatural Organization. West had sent her. Because other than Chen Zhao, Nagasaka Reiko was the only Asian in the organization. He felt that since they had the same black hair and eyes, he would feel more at ease when interacting with Xiao He. However, West didn't know that Xiao He had just come out of China and was a fugitive. Therefore, she was especially sensitive to strangers with the same skin color. When Nagasaka Reiko walked toward Xiao He's body was already tense. Niho, Nagasaka Reiko was about to speak. Suddenly, Xiao He turned and ran. Nagasaka Reiko froze. What was going on? Was she that scary? In the hotel, Chen Zhao and Li Qing both saw the scene. Li Qing asked, your people? Yes. Chen Zhao nodded. Did Xiao He get attacked recently? Why is she reacting so violently? No, but she probably sensed the situation. Yesterday, she said she was going to rent a house outside. She probably doesn't want to drag me and Ethan down. Chen Zhao glanced at Nagasaka Reiko. Chase after her. What are you waiting for? Yes. Nagasaka Reiko immediately chased after Xiao He. Xiao He looked behind her and realized that Nagasaka Reiko was very fast. She was scared out of her wits and didn't dare to stop. Nagasaka Reiko complained. Speed wasn't her forte. Her current speed was indeed extraordinary, but she couldn't keep it up. After thinking for a while, Nagasaka Reiko thought of a solution. Mantra, Windsickle Power. Windsickle was a Japanese monster transformed from a wind. It hid in the wind. It was very similar to a meerkat, but it was a different type of monster. Meerkats were also wind elemental monsters, but one was an animal-type monster, while the other was an elemental monster. The mantra spell that Nagasaka Reiko used was similar to China's Divine Strike. Chapter 2820. Huaxiao's Godly Strike borrowed the power of immortals. Dong Ying's mantra borrowed the power of monsters. Of course, there wasn't much difference between the two. Maybe there was a big gap between the strength of monsters and immortals, but most of them exceeded the upper limit of human beings. Secondly, the upper limit of the power that humans could bear was also limited. It was like a person going to the bank to borrow money. There wasn't much difference between finding a bank with a total assets of 10 billion and a bank with a total assets of 100 billion. Nagasaka Reiko's body was immediately wrapped in a layer of dark wind. If a spiritualist were to look at it, he would notice more things. Xiao He also found something unusual about Nagasaka Reiko. At the same time, she also found that Nagasaka Reiko's speed was ridiculously fast. Xiao He could only grit her teeth and use her acceleration spell. She didn't have any intention of fighting. She still subconsciously wanted to run away, regardless of the strength of the other party. When she was in China, most of the time, she would run first. The only time she fought was when she was with Wang He. If she ran away at that time, Wang He would definitely fall into the hands of the other party. She didn't realize that she was now abroad, and this wasn't the home ground of the enemy. Just like that, one chased and one ran. Both sides ran with all their might. The hotel was originally remote in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Xiao He ran again and accidentally ran out of the city of Los Angeles. And Xiao He was also honest and just ran along the road. Nagasaka Reiko was about to have a heart attack at this moment. She wasn't an enhancer, and her stamina couldn't keep up at all, even if there was a spell that could borrow the power of monsters. But the monsters only lent her the power of the wind. It made her run faster, but it couldn't make her endurance longer. Xiao He, who was in front, wasn't much better than Nagasaka Reiko. She wasn't an enhancer either. Although it wasn't a godly strike spell, it was still a spell that could lighten the body. Although it could make her run faster, it also consumed stamina. Finally, the two stopped running. They really couldn't run anymore. The two women, one in front and one behind, hugged their knees and gasped for breath. Don't chase. Can you speak English? I don't know Chinese. Nagasaka Reiko said with a dry mouth. You don't know Chinese? You're not from China? Could it be that those people hired you to kill me? I'm not here to kill you. Your God Refinement sect and the supernatural organization are partners. Our vice president heard you were being chased here, so he sent me to talk to you. Nagasaka Reiko didn't care about her image anymore. She wiped her dry lips. Xiao He, who was in the front, was almost the same. When she heard Nagasaka Reiko's words, she relaxed a little. But she didn't completely believe Nagasaka Reiko's words. After all, he had escaped from many pursuits. How could he easily believe the words of others? What evidence do you have? Lily questioned. My dear mother, what proof could I have? Your family has already been destroyed, so why would I need to lie to you? Nagasaka Reiko also felt stifled. There was no evidence, just two words. Whether you believe it or not has nothing to do with me. Then the evidence came knocking. To be precise, he was a witness. A group of people who looked like bad guys appeared. However, This group of bad people drove a car and blocked Nagasaki Reko and Xiao He. These two idiots clearly didn't need to use their legs to solve the problem. Anyone with a bit of brain would know that driving was more convenient than running. Why did they have to run 20 or 30 kilometers with their legs? Looking at the bad guys who got out of the car, Nagasaki Reko and Xiao, he suddenly realized that there was a hole in their brains. Xiao, he didn't say anything, but Nagasaki Reko realized that she had a car, and she had driven over. Why did she have to run away? When Xiao, he saw the people coming, her face suddenly turned ugly. She only recognized one of them, her martial uncle, who was also related to her by blood. At the same time, he was also one of the main culprits who betrayed her father. Xiao He, long time no see. Yi Xingchen looked at Xiao He with a smile. He was a few years older than Xiao He, and he looked like a big brother. In fact, he was one generation older than Xiao He. Of course, Xiao He was a young lady who was raised freely, so she couldn't be compared to Yi Xingchen. Yi Xingchen had always been working hard in the spiritual world. His cultivation methods were first class in the entire Huaxia's spiritual world. Xiao He looked at Yi Xingchen with a face full of anger. Nagasaki Reko glanced at Yi Xingchen and the others and asked, "Enemies?" Xiao He looked at Nagasaki Reiko's position and posture change and nodded slightly. "They're after me," Nagasaki Reiko shouted. "Everyone, this is not your territory. If you want to cause trouble here, you'd better inform the supernatural organization first." "Ha! Supernatural organization?" Everyone, including Yi Xingchen, laughed like crazy. Except for Yi Xingchen, everyone else was hired by him. They were all private jobs in the spiritual world, and some of them were even international. Of course, they knew the industry rules of paying respects when they landed. But this rule was only for the top forces. For example, a top-notch faction in a region would have its own sphere of influence. When the others came to this area, they would either keep a low profile or pay respects to the port first, indicating that they would leave after finishing their business. And in this large area, there were many small forces attached to it, so there was no need to pay respects. In their view, the supernatural organization was one of these small forces. They didn't know if there were any big forces in North America, but they didn't think the supernatural organization was qualified to make them pay respects. Nagasaki Reiko seemed to have expected this kind of reaction. She had now been promoted from an outer member to an official member. Together with her colleagues, she had dealt with many cases of foreign spiritualists causing trouble in the Los Angeles area. When those spiritualists heard about the supernatural organization, most of them were arrogant. Before they were beaten up, they were all arrogant. But as long as they were here, Nagasaki Reiko really wasn't worried. Even if she was alone now, she never worried that she would lack support. This was her home field. "I'll give you a chance to apologize," Nagasaki Reiko said flatly. "Also, pay the fee for entering the country illegally." What did it mean to enter the country illegally? That meant that they didn't like you and you had entered the country illegally. Suddenly, a cold light shot at Nagasaki Reiko without warning. Whoosh! A glass-like halo suddenly flashed on Nagasaki Reiko's body, blocking the cold light outside the glass. Nagasaki Reiko loosened her palm, and a pile of ashes fell. Single-use magic tool, Dragon's Lament. Nagasaki Reiko looked at the defunct dragon's lament with pity. It was good, but it could only be used once. What a pity. Chapter 28-21. It was Ruan Faxbin's proudest work. Of course, apart from the outrageously high price of the magic materials. It also contained Ruan Faxbin's design and philosophy, unless it was an attack that exceeded a certain limit. Most of the time, Dragonbone Sorrow could block most attacks. Its upper limit was about 60% of a dragon's attack power. Its defense was very, very shocking. Apart from its high price, there was another disadvantage. It was a consumable item. Forget about Ruan Faxbin's labor and time cost. The price of the magic materials alone was the same as a top-end Porsche 911. Nagasaki Reiko felt that it was a pity. After all, this thing had helped her block many magic attacks. She didn't expect it to be scrapped here. But the attack just now was indeed not weak. Although Dragonbone Sorrow had already lost 70% of its defense, it still had 20% left. However, at the very least, 2 or 3 points of the Dragonbone Sorrow remained intact. With a single attack, the Dragonbone Sorrow's final bit of defense disappeared. This was enough to prove the power of the attack. A silver-haired woman also looked at Nagasaka Reiko in surprise. Ice magic. She was a spiritualist from Greenland, Line Mace. She also had a special bloodline. She could absorb the cold air in the air. Every time she left Greenland for a mission, she would absorb enough cold air. The cold air could multiply the power of her ice magic. She was confident that the attack just now could freeze the girl into a block of ice. But under her confident attack, the girl was actually unharmed. Line Mace walked forward. "Can I play with this girl?" "Go ahead." Yi Xingqian was quite relaxed. If it was a place with strong forces in the spiritual world, they would usually end the battle quickly. There is rarely time for people to entertain themselves. Take the Huaxiao region as an example. In the entertainment industry there would be someone who would stand up for injustice at any time. Once, a foreign organization had chased them all the way to a small village in China. In the end, a farmer with a hoe kicked a group of spiritualists until they couldn't take care of themselves. Plus, Chen Zhao was nearby. Nagasaka Reiko wasn't scared at all. Right now she was thinking, whoever is scared is a coward. But to them, this was North America. To them, coming here to carry out missions was a form of leisure. Atari Matt's hands were emitting cold air as a cruel smile appeared on his face. She had confirmed that her attack just now was blocked by Nagasaka Reiko's magic tool. However, that attack had also destroyed the magic tool. Next, it was time for her solo performance. Nagasaka Reiko frowned, opened her jacket, and pulled out a ring from the inside. This action caused everyone to be stunned because of the ring on Nagasaka Reiko's hand. Each ring exuded a dangerous aura, and when the auras of all the rings were mixed together, it was as if bottles of dangerous chemicals had been randomly poured together. Nagasaka Reiko calmly put a ring on her ring finger, and then picked a ring and put it on her middle finger, then her index finger, pinky finger, thumb, and then changed to the 5 fingers of her right hand. Everyone's expression was a little strange. Was this woman the Lord of the Rings? The people of the supernatural society all had the idea that if they didn't have enough magic, they would have to make up for it with equipment. Magic resistance buff, physical resistance buff, mana buff, perception buff, spellcasting buff, mana recovery buff. Each ring represented a different effect. All of them used certain parts of the dragon's body as the main magic material. In terms of function and effect, it was much stronger than similar magic tools on the market. Furthermore, Ruan Faxi had also followed the settings of a certain movie. Every time a ring was added, the rings would resonate with each other, thus further enhancing the effect. Even in some specific combinations, there would be a third effect. For this reason, Ruan Faxi had specially compiled a set of equipment guide. Nagasaka Reiko smiled and opened her arms. She clenched her left palm slightly, and a cold current appeared in front of her. The cold current quickly condensed into a human figure, hovering above the ground. A beautiful woman in a kimono, her whole body covered in frost, appeared in front of everyone. Yukino. Many people recognized this woman in white. She was the famous monster in Japan, Yukino. Play with her. Sorry, master, can you speak Japanese? I don't understand English. Nagasaka Reiko didn't even have time to finish acting before she was slapped in the face by her own Shikigami. Fortunately, the others didn't speak Japanese, otherwise it would be embarrassing. Line Mace didn't feel good, because all of her magic was ice magic. It was very effective against normal enemies. But against ice monsters? Was she going to buff them? I'm not good at dealing with this kind of enemy. Line Mace decisively admitted defeat. Instead of being beaten to the point where she couldn't take care of herself and then asking for help, it was better to be straightforward. At this time, a bald man came out. I'll do it. I'm good at it. With that, the bald man's fists burst into flames. Nagasaka Reiko quietly formed a seal with her hands. 2 flames appeared, one green, the other dark red. The 2 flames quickly turned into 2 monsters. The green flame turned into a bird-shaped monster, green heron fire. The dark red flame turned into a 100-faced monster, grand ant fire. The green heron fire was condensed from the soul fire of birds, while the grand ant fire was condensed from the resentment of lonely old people abandoned in the mountains. Both green heron fire and grand ant fire were fire, but full of resentment for the world. They weren't Nagasaka Reiko's Shikigami, but summoned monsters. They weren't weaker than snow girls, but they weren't smart enough, so they weren't suitable as Shikigami. Yishinchin's expression changed. Where did this Japanese woman come from? She was so powerful. Since when did Japan have such a genius girl? He'd never heard of her. She could summon 3 big monsters at once. This strength couldn't be underestimated. The bald man was also slightly embarrassed. If Arteli Mace's attacks were ineffective because they had the same element, then the bald man would be countered. Then the bald man would be countered by her. His fire element wasn't weak, but he hated enemies with fire the most. Not only were his attacks ineffective, but it would also be very troublesome if he was touched by the fire. This woman is powerful. Let's attack together, Yishinchin said. Nagasaka Reiko didn't panic at all. She still had a big move. I'll give you one last chance. Get out of my sight now, or else. As soon as Nagasaka Reiko finished her warning, she heard Chun Zhao's voice. Warn my ass. Beat her down first. Chapter 28-22. Nagasaka Reiko felt stifled. Can you move according to my rhythm? But she couldn't say this, at least not in front of Chun Zhao. So, Nagasaka Reiko decisively chose to obey Chun Zhao's order. Facing a large wave of enemies, under normal circumstances, Nagasaka Reiko would cover her head and run. But with the ring, she dared to face anyone head-on, except Chun Zhao. She even dared to use an ultimate move that she hadn't dared to before. Nagasaka Reiko looked up at the sky. You forced me to do this. Nagasaka Reiko sighed. Using an ultimate move during the day was so tiring. At the same time, she looked back at Xiaohe. Can you take me home later? What? Xiaohe looked at Nagasaka Reiko, confused. Just then, the sky suddenly darkened. A patch of dark clouds covered the area. Nagasaka Reiko's lips moved, but she wasn't chanting. She was muttering. She didn't like using this move, especially during the day. Especially since it was almost noon, when the yang energy was the strongest. Suddenly, a cold wind blew past. Yishinchin and the others couldn't help but shiver. They just wanted to surround and attack, but now they wanted to retreat. The cold wind made them feel uneasy and indescribable danger. Behind Nagasaka Reiko, a series of real or illusory or real figures appeared. Everyone's expression changed drastically. A few of them were even more panicked and terrified. Most people only felt danger. However, the ones who seemed to be in a panic knew more than them. They recognized this spell. Ghost Parade. It was one of the 2 forbidden spells along with the Western Kingdom of the Dead. Of course, it was called a forbidden spell because it was too difficult to cast. Those who had truly mastered this spell would still use it in times of danger. Yishinchin felt stifled. Why did such a ruthless Japanese woman suddenly appear? You're so strong. Do you really have to fight us to the death? The road is wide open. Who can stop you if you want to run? We have small arms and legs. Do you really have to use Ghost Parade? Do you know what the consequences of Ghost Parade are? Yes. Of course Nagasaka Reiko knew. So she felt even more stifled now. Do you think I want to? Do you think I want to use the Ghost Parade on a hot day? Actually, Chun Zhao didn't force her. With her identity as the Lord of the Rings, even if she didn't use the Knight of 100 Ghosts, she could still rely on her skills to take down the opponent. But she still wanted to show Chun Zhao that she could fight. He did not become an official member through nepotism. The Knight of 100 Ghosts was obviously the most powerful move. Apart from the temporary contamination of the area, the user would faint for 3 to 5 days due to mana exhaustion, and would be physically weak for 3 to 5 months. There were no other side effects. Moreover, during the day, especially at noon, the effects of the Ghost Parade would be greatly reduced. However, it was enough to deal with these people. The illusion of a huge, long-faced demon appeared. That was the demon commander Slippery Demon, the most powerful demon in Japanese legends. With Nagasaka Reiko's strength, it was impossible for her to summon a slippery fellow. This was just a wisp of crafty scoundrel's aura. But even so, it was enough to freeze the atmosphere. More and more demons appeared. However, some of them were too weak. They were so weak that they were reduced to ashes in 2 steps. The powerful demons hadn't completely appeared yet. At Nagasaka Reiko's command, all the demons that had appeared charged toward Yishinshin's group. The strongest of the demons that had appeared might not even be as strong as a dog, but they had the advantage in numbers. They pounced on the opponent and bit one person in 3 to 5. The opponent was a spiritualist and would not be hurt by these little demons, but they would definitely be flustered. Nagasaka Reiko was not in a hurry. The Night of 100 Ghosts was like this. As time passed, the bigger and bigger demons would appear, and the situation would slowly tilt in her favor. Right now, the opponent was just resisting with his back against the wall. Nagasaka Reiko had a very light and breezy attitude. Without even looking at the situation on the battlefield, she picked up the phone. "Mr. West, I'm on Route 9 now. Can you send Henry and the others to clean up the battlefield later? I cast a polluting spell. There will be a lot of demonic aura nearby. If ordinary people come in, they will be polluted and demonized to a certain extent." Nagasaka Reiko was talking on the phone as if nothing had happened. Seeing Nagasaka Reiko's attitude, Yishinshin immediately shouted, "Don't fight with those little demons. Take down that woman first. Otherwise, we're all finished." With that, Yishinshin took the lead and rushed toward Nagasaka Reiko. Along the way, several demons that had decent power immediately intercepted Yishinshin. Yishinshin's figure flashed, and suddenly, 3 figures that looked exactly like him appeared. Yishinshin's real body continued to rush toward Nagasaka Reiko. "Watch out!" Xiao exclaimed. Nagasaka Reiko didn't even look up. She was still on the phone, and her empty right hand casually raised. Hiss, hiss, hiss! Suddenly a sharp, ear-piercing sound rang out. Yishinshin cursed inwardly and immediately retreated. At the same time, several clones appeared in a flash. As for the clones, they were instantly sliced apart. In front of Nagasaka Reiko, thin threads that could not be heard appeared. If it weren't for the bloodstains on those threads, it would have been even harder to detect. Behind Nagasaka Reiko, 8 insect legs appeared. The legs slowly spread out like petals, and then an even larger body appeared behind Nagasaka Reiko. Bride Luo, half-body woman, half-spider. And this Bride Luo's demonic aura was even more terrifying than the Snow Woman. At the same time, it was accompanied by a strong smell of blood. Bride Luo was not Nagasaka Reiko's Shikigami. She was Nagasaka Reiko's spirit possession demon. This was an extremely special spell of the Japanese Shinto. It was similar to the ghost-raising spell of Southeast Asia, but it was different. The spirit possession demon was to first find a suitable demon, preferably a growth cycle similar to that of a human, and at the same time have enough room for growth. Then, the host's soul was deposited in the body of the young demon. In the process of growth, the young demon would merge with part of the host's soul, and finally, the two would merge into one. Bride Luo was a very good choice. Her lifespan was almost the same as that of a human, and she was powerful. But Bride Luo was extremely difficult to catch, especially when they were social demons. The young demon would be protected by the main group, and outsiders would not be able to touch them. Nagasaka Reiko had raised this Bride Luo since she was young, and the process was rather cruel. Chun Zhao knew this too. Of course, Nagasaka Reiko's method was cruel, but the feed she chose was still accepted by Chun Zhao and the supernatural organization. For Chun Zhao, as long as the target was suitable, it didn't matter how cruel it was. They were all people who deserved to die anyway. Chapter 28-23. The battle was already over when Nagasaka Reiko used the 100 Ghost Parade. At this time, Nagasaka Reiko couldn't be defeated, at least not by the people in front of her, because at this time, she could mobilize the power of any monster at will. She was like a collection of monsters. Yi Xingqian had obviously made the worst choice, and he couldn't even win over a bride, let alone win over Nagasaka Reiko. In the supernatural organization, a few of the top members all had trump cards. For example, Hela's undead army and abyssal demons. For example, Norma's nightmare transformation. For example, Gaia's dragon form and Angelite's supersonic speed. When they used these trump cards, it often meant that victory was beckoning to them. Now Nagasaka Reiko also had a trump card. She wasn't at the top yet. In the supernatural organization, she was still at the bottom. After using the 100 Ghost Parade, she directly became a high-end combat power on par with the other top combat powers. But her 100 Ghost Parade still had a big flaw, so she was still a long way from being a real high-end combat power. In a moment of carelessness, Yi Xingqian's shoulder was cut open by a thin thread. It almost completely cut open his shoulder. Yi Xingqian hurriedly retreated in fear. He shouted, "Go, get out of here!" Yi Xingqian decisively turned around and ran. The others also didn't want to fight anymore. In just a short while, there were already 2 casualties. If they fought again, everyone would probably be left here. Nagasaka Reiko didn't stop them too much. She could actually stop them if she wanted to. But she almost couldn't hold on. The longer the 100 Ghost Parade lasted, the more powerful the summoned monsters would be. But it also meant that she would face greater pressure. The reason why the 100 Ghost Parade and the Kingdom of the Undead could be called the 2 forbidden techniques of the East and the West. Because there was no limit to the 100 Ghost Parade, but no cultivator could keep it up until the end. Usually, after the battle, they would take the initiative to cancel the 100 Ghost Parade. Or if their body collapsed before the battle was over, the 100 Ghost Parade would automatically cancel. The moment the 100 Ghost Parade was canceled, Nagasaka Reiko also lost the power of the monsters. Her body collapsed to the ground, trembling slightly. Seeing Nagasaka Reiko's state, Xiaohe immediately ran forward and asked, "How are you?" "I'm fine," Nagasaka Reiko said weakly. "What do we do now?" "Wait for my people. The vice president and the other members will be here soon." Nagasaka Reiko knew that Chun Zhao was nearby. She couldn't sense where Chun Zhao was hiding, but he was definitely there. Not long after, West arrived with Henry and the others. Henry and his men were now part of the Supernatural Organizations team. He was in charge of dealing with the traces left behind by the Supernatural Society. Simple ones included destroying corpses, but more serious ones included the destruction left behind by large-scale battles. "Henry, I'll leave this place to you," Nagasaka Reiko said gently. "Leave it to me. It won't be a problem," Henry said confidently. This was not the first time he had done something like this. The current him was completely different from the past. Ever since he had followed his boss to the supernatural organization to cause trouble for no reason. Then, after boss was stuffed into the meat grinder, he changed. He no longer needed to follow someone else to the police station for that meager reward. He no longer needed to face off against the police at great risk. He was now an official member of the supernatural organization. Of course, he was also the weakest official member. But he was also one of the most indispensable members. He had solved many problems for the organization. Even Chun Zhao often had to rely on his ability. Henry's first ability was to fart a very, very smelly gas. However, as his ability was further developed, he discovered that there was something unusual about his ability. It wasn't as simple as farting. If he had to explain his ability, it could be called supernatural purification. The gas he released could neutralize the remaining magic, demonic aura, and death aura in the air. In a short period of time, the environment would return to normal. Through this neutralization, he could also recycle the gas and refine it, making it a part of his power. Although this kind of cultivation process was slow, it was also unique. West came to Xiaohe. "Hello, Miss Yi. I'm West, the vice president of the Supernatural Organization. I don't know if your father told you about our alliance." "I didn't hear it from my father." Xiaohe looked at West warily. She wasn't sure if he really wanted to save her, or was he here for the thing in her hand. After all, she'd experienced some things. So, Xiaohe was no longer a little rabbit that had just left the rabbit's nest. She knew how sinister people were. Some people and some things couldn't be judged on the surface. Okay. I'm very sad about your father and what happened to you. When I heard that something happened to your father, I actually wanted to go and help him, but you know that the Huaxia supernatural world isn't a place where outsiders like us can come and go as we please. Our abilities are limited. Xiaohe didn't speak. She was thinking about West's intentions. Was he really just lending a helping hand because of an ally that wasn't so reliable in the past? Xiaohe didn't believe that West would be so kind. After all, the God Refinement sect had a few family friends or her father's good friends in China. But when it came to the critical moment, there wasn't even anyone to help her. She didn't believe that a bunch of foreigners would help her. Fortunately, our president was in China at the time, so I asked him to bring you out of the country. I wasn't brought out by your president, Xiaohe said indifferently. Are you sure? West smiled at Xiaohe. Of course I'm sure. Then why do you think that the person who brought you out isn't our president? How is that possible? He's Chinese. Why can't a Chinese be our president? Xiaohe was somewhat shocked. Are you serious? Brother Wang is really your president? Brother Wang? Who? Huh? Not Brother Wang? The president I'm talking about is Chen Zhao. Huh? Mr. Chen? Xiaohe was even more shocked. Of course. Who else do you think he is? Him? Isn't he an ordinary person? He's not an ordinary person. He's very powerful. At least, he's more powerful than the people I know. Xiaohe didn't refute. She thought that these foreigners didn't know what a real expert was like. The Japanese lady was indeed very powerful, but that was nothing. After all, Xiaohe was the young mistress of the God Refinement sect. She had seen the world. She had seen a truly terrifying expert. Therefore, she didn't agree with West at all. In other words, Mr. Chen knew my identity from the beginning? Chapter 28-24. After finishing his work, Henry drove his newly bought car home. In the past, Henry was hated by everyone. Everyone in the family hated him. But it was different now. His family was filled with disbelief. Now, Henry had a well-paid and decent job. He drove a luxury car to and from work every day and dressed differently from before. In the past, Henry dressed in a sloppy street style. He was the same in winter and summer. Most of the time his family could see him. It was when he went to the police station to bail him out. At first, his family thought that what they saw was a facade. Maybe Henry was still doing something illegal. Until they found Henry's tax return. Only then did they know that Henry was looking for a proper job. After all, illegal activities couldn't be filed. But when they asked Henry what kind of job he did, Henry said that he was in the company's confidential department and involved many core secrets. It was not convenient for him to reveal the specific content of his job. Mom, I'm back. Henry still lived with his mother. Henry, you're back so early. Don't tell me you skipped work? Henry's mother was in her early 50s, but she looked like she was in her 40s. She was a relatively ordinary woman. In her early years, she was actually a delinquent. Later, she married an alcoholic and divorced him. She raised Henry and his children alone. But because of the burden of life and work, she didn't have much time to control Henry. This also caused Henry to be particularly rebellious. It could be said that he inherited her personality. But Henry was luckier than her. Although Henry went astray for a few years, he still found an opportunity. Mom, I just finished my work early. Henry shrugged. Look what I bought you. This is expensive, right? Henry's mother took the box. It was a magnetic therapy machine for the neck. Henry must have found it when she watched a shopping show last time. It's not expensive. The price is acceptable. Henry enjoyed his current life and treasured it very much. Mom, I've already bought a house outside. Are you moving out? Henry's mother asked, a little disappointed. But this was inevitable. In the past, Henry did nothing. If he didn't work, he would only cause trouble. That was why he had been living with her. It was different now. He already had a stable job. Naturally, he had to move out like his brothers and sisters. My new house is very big. I can't live in it alone. I hope you can live with me. Henry was still reluctant to part with his mother. No, I don't want to cause trouble for you and your future wife. How long did she think Henry had been working? In less than a year, even if he saved some money, he would barely be able to buy a down payment for a small house. Furthermore, he might not be able to get along well with his future daughter-in-law. Mom, I'm serious. My future girlfriend and wife needs to learn how to get along with you first. Henry, you've really grown up, but I don't think you can take it for granted. No, Mom, my house is really big. It's a villa. I don't want to clean it alone. Villa? How could this be? Where did you get so much money? The down payment was paid by my boss. How is this possible? What does your boss do? Henry's mother was suddenly afraid that Henry's boss was just using a legal-looking company to disguise his illegal business. Perhaps Henry was still carrying on his illegal work. If that was the case, it would be no different from the past. Mom, don't worry. He's doing serious work. Dash and Beer is his business. To tell you the truth, I'm actually in charge of supplying him with raw materials. Dash and Beer is selling so well, so there must be a secret formula. However, if ordinary people were to supply the raw materials, it would be easy for others to guess the formula. Therefore, I signed a confidentiality agreement with a few others. Our boss gave us a lot of money to rope us in. Do you know what I mean? This villa was given to me by him. He said that if I work for 5 years, he'll help me pay off the balance of the villa in one go. I see. Henry, do your best. Don't let your boss down. Of course, but Mom, you also need to keep it a secret from me. You don't know what methods our boss's competitors will use to get the formula. I know. I've watched spy TV shows. Henry's mother finally understood what her son was doing. She was happy and relieved at the same time. In the past, when Henry's job was mentioned, Henry always acted like he had something to hide. Henry's mother always worried that Henry's job was not as legal as it seemed. Now, she finally didn't have to worry anymore. Mom, if you don't like Dash and Beer, I can ask the boss for some coupons. Can I really? That's great. Henry's mother wasn't a heavy drinker, but she still drank 2 cans of beer with every meal. Her favorite was Dash and Beer, but the price of Dash and Beer was always more expensive than other brands on the market. Every few days, Henry would come back with a few boxes of Dash and Beer. However, it was still not enough for her. Now, she finally understood why Henry could get so much Dash and Beer. It turned out that he was an internal employee of Dash and Beer. From what he said, he seemed to be a core employee, a very important one. Henry, if a competitor wants to get raw materials from you, don't betray your secrets for money. If your boss finds out, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Of course, betray, Chunjiao. This option didn't exist in Henry's dictionary. This was simply courting death. Take me to see your new home. No, it's our new home. What about this house? I've lived here for decades. Your grandpa left it to me. See if Arco, Montel, and Jim want to live here. If not, rent it out. Mom, you like our new home? When Henry's mother saw the new house, she was still a bit shocked. She'd lived in the slums all her life, but she never thought that one day she would be able to live in such a luxurious house. Henry, do we have guests? Whose car is the one at the door? It's yours, Mom. That's my real gift to you. It's far from the nearest supermarket, and I don't want you to ask me to fix cars every time I come home, even though I've worked in a garage for 2 months. Seeing his mother's expression filled with disbelief and excitement, Henry felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. Henry, I love you. Mom, I love you too. Just then, 2 people came to the door. Henry's mother recognized them. They used to hang out with Henry. She was worried that her son would be led astray by them again. Chapter 28-25. Henry, Zella's, Morrison, how come you're here? Henry, Mr. West told us to come. He heard that you bought a new house and wanted to ask if you're planning to rent your old house. Mr. West wants to rent my house? Sort of. It's that Miss Yee who just came today. She's looking for a house now, so we told Mr. West about your situation. He asked us to help him ask. If it's someone from the company and Mr. West asked, then I'll lend the house to Miss Yee for now, Henry said. He glanced at his mother beside him. Mom, is that okay? Of course. Is that Mr. West your boss? No, he's our vice president, Henry said. When they talked outside, they always referred to the supernatural organization as a company. Chun Zhao was the boss, while West was the vice president. That house can't be rented for much, even on the market. It's not a problem to lend it to Mr. West, as long as he doesn't burn my house down. After Zellas and Morrison finished their discussion, they took their leave. Henry's mother saw that the two didn't drive a rundown car. It seemed to be a good car. They were also dressed well and spoke in an orderly manner. Henry, are Zella's and Morrison your colleagues too? They're under me now, Henry said proudly. You're their superior? I'm in charge of a department now. You know a few people in my department. Why did your boss take you all in? Speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. Once, a dozen of my brothers and I went to the boss's business to make trouble. Then, the boss taught us a lesson and asked us to compensate him. We couldn't afford the compensation, so in the end, the boss asked us to stay and work until the money was paid. Later, the boss needed skilled workers, so we recommended ourselves. The boss saw that we were quite obedient during that time, so he agreed to give us a chance. I think your boss asked you to compensate to help you change. Your boss is really a good person. Huh, yeah. Mom, if you knew what he did in the past, I think you'd swallow your words. When Xiaohe interacted with West, it could be said that she was scared witless. She had been accumulating power in secret. If there was a disagreement, she would attack at any time. But the result was not what she had expected. West didn't even know about the thing in her hand, or maybe he didn't even mention it. He only arranged for her to stay and asked someone to help her find a house on the same day. Mr. Chun. Xiaohe dialed his number. What is it? You're the leader of the supernatural organization. Is there a problem? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why should I tell you? Xiaohe didn't know how to continue this topic. You already knew my identity? No, I only found out after I sent you overseas. Initially, I had only accepted Wang He's request, that's all. So you don't have to think about anything else. Saving you is purely a favor. Hearing this, Xiaohe heaved a sigh of relief. No matter what, thank you, Mr. Chun. Xiaohe was silent for a long time on the other end of the phone. Chun Zhao broke the silence first. Mr. Chun, I have something. No matter what you have, you don't have to tell me, and you don't have to use it to save your life. Neither I nor West are interested in it. Our goal has never been something in your hands. If you're in danger, you can go to the Supernatural Organization's headquarters to seek protection. Did West give you the address? Yes. Okay, that's it. Chun Zhao hung up. Xiaohe felt complicated. Actually, she was testing Chun Zhao. After all, it was over the phone. If Chun Zhao showed any desire for that thing, then she would choose to disappear completely so that Chun Zhao would never be able to find her. She didn't have absolute trust in Chun Zhao or the Supernatural Organization. Actually, Chun Zhao and West had guessed that Xiaohe might have the ultimate treasure of the alchemy sect. Otherwise, why would the traitors of the alchemy sect come all the way overseas to kill her? Both of them felt that the possibility was very low, unless they had a deep grudge against each other. But Xiaohe definitely didn't have a deep grudge against them. With Xiaohe's age, her biggest grudge was probably someone's head she'd smashed when she was young. So, unless there were enough benefits, the traitors wouldn't come all the way to kill Xiaohe. But neither Chun Zhao nor West was interested in the thing in Xiaohe's hand. It was like a billionaire. Would he be interested in a commoner who won the lottery? Chun Zhao still had the disc and spear that Zhang had given him. Even now, Chun Zhao still didn't know what these two things were used for. However, Chun Zhao could vaguely feel that these two things had extraordinary origins. Perhaps it was some kind of ancient divine artifact or something like that. So, when Chun Zhao was at home, he would take them out every few days to study them. He wanted to see if he could activate them or make them recognize him as their master. But Chun Zhao had almost tried everything: dripping blood, channeling immortal power, using water bubbles, or roasting them with fire. But the disc and spear still didn't react. More radical methods didn't work right now. They didn't look like they would last long. Chun Zhao was afraid that if he used too much strength, he would destroy the two items. As for Zhang, he still wouldn't say it directly. He told Chun Zhao to study it himself. But Chun Zhao couldn't study it all. Most of what he knew was based on his own imagination. Only a few of them were based on popular fantasy methods. Darling, what do these two look like? Chun Zhao decided to change his method. Perhaps as an outsider, Fei Lai could give him a different answer. Spear and shield. Am I right? Chun Zhao was a bit disappointed. He shrugged. I don't know. Zhang gave them to me. I don't know what they're for. He just said that it's my reward when I came back last time. Fei Lai walked up and picked up the disc. What material is this? It's much lighter than I thought. It doesn't feel like stone or metal. It's really strange. Phalai flipped the disc over. There were some patterns on the reverse side. These aren't Taoist patterns. They're more like oracle bone inscriptions or marks left behind by a similar civilization. Maybe you can ask an archaeologist. Chun Zhao thought of Falui Lysander, but he still didn't know if Falui would be willing to help him with his attitude last time. Chapter 28-26. Mr. Falui, do you have time? Mr. Chun, I'm busy right now. Falui Lysander rejected Chun Zhao's invitation without hesitation. No matter what Chun Zhao wanted him to do, he didn't want to have anything to do with Chun Zhao anymore. After this cooperation ended, they would have nothing to do with each other. If Mr. Falui has time, you can come and get the check you left with me last time. Falui Lysander opened his mouth. In the end, he didn't reject Chun Zhao. Sometimes things were like this. Dignity couldn't beat reality. Now, he was faced with such a choice. Plus, it was an easy choice. Dignity was very important, but compared to money, it was dispensable. When? Now. Wait a moment. I'll hand over my work. A moment later, Falui Lysander came to Chun Zhao's manor again. It wasn't his first time here, but he still couldn't help but exclaim every time he saw the manor's panoramic view. However, Falui Lysander didn't like coming here, because when he saw this manor, he felt like a poor man. Mr. Chun, hello. He saw Chun Zhao again. There wasn't the same tension as last time. Chun Zhao didn't give him any face either. Plus, Chun Zhao was the one who begged him to come. Hello, please sit. Would you like something to drink? No, thank you. Let's talk business first. Mr. Chun, why did you call me here? Chun Zhao took out a piece of Xian paper that he'd copied. Look at the symbols on it. Maybe they're words. Can you help me identify which civilization these symbols come from? Or do they represent some kind of message? Falui Lysander picked up the paper and looked at it. It's unfamiliar, but there's a pattern to these symbols. Mr. Chun, where did they come from? A friend gave me something. I copied it from that thing. Chun Zhao looked at Falui Lysander. Can you see the pattern? I'm not an expert. Even if I was, I'd need some time to analyze. Plus, Mr. Chun provided too little information. It's hard to judge. Falui Lysander shrugged. For example, oracle bone inscriptions. More than 800 characters have been unearthed and discovered. This is enough to build a common vocabulary for a language system. However, less than a third of oracle bone inscriptions have been translated. I'm afraid you can't even tell the most basic information from the things you provided. Is there any way to determine the origin of these things? Haven't there been similar things in history? No. If Mr. Chun has discovered any relevant relics, I suggest that you keep them. Once the archaeologists make a major discovery, the value of the items in Mr. Chen's hands will skyrocket by 100 or even 1,000 times. Is there anyone in the archaeological world who could decipher the contents of these runes for me? Any price will do. Recently, Mr. Shilai Wenger happened to be in Los Angeles for an archaeological conference. He is the chairman of the World Archaeological Union and the most famous archaeologist. Although he is retired, his vision and knowledge are obvious to all. If there is only one person in this world who can give you the answer, it must be him. Archaeological Union? They were probably a group of people who dug up ancestral graves. Chun Zhao cursed inwardly, but he still showed enough respect verbally. Can you invite Mr. Shilai Wenger here? He rarely participates in archaeological research and exploration these days. He is now committed to promoting the Archaeological Alliance and getting more people and groups to join them. Chun Zhao quickly took out his checkbook. Then, he wrote a check and handed it to Falui Lysander. Falui Lysander glanced at the number on the check. It's not a small amount, but it doesn't seem to be enough to invite Mr. Wenger. This is for you, Chun Zhao said. This is for Mr. Wenger. Of course, if he agrees, I can also sponsor some fun for the Archaeological Alliance. Falui Lysander sucked in a breath of cold air. This guy was really generous. The number on the check was equivalent to his own wealth. Falui Lysander suddenly regretted not studying archaeology in the beginning. The shadow of the tree. Just hearing the name of the person in the tree, Falui Lysander took out half of his life's wealth to invite the person. How can I reason with him? But Falui Lysander clearly didn't plan to reject. After all, Chun Zhao's check was also a large sum of money, a sum that was enough to move his heart. Of course, Falui Lysander didn't think that Shilai Wenger would reject. Shilai Wenger's academics were indeed respected by the archaeological world. However, he was just an ordinary person. He wasn't someone who had no desires. Therefore, Falui Lysander was sure that Shilai Wenger would definitely accept Chun Zhao's invitation. Mr. Chen, when are you free? When can you invite Shilai Wenger over? I don't think it's a problem, Falui Lysander said confidently. He had interacted with Shilai Wenger before. Although the old man looked gentle and refined, he did not dare to provoke him. However, he didn't have a scholarly temperament at all. In the past few years, he'd been in the news with at least 10 women. No one would object to calling him an old hooligan in the archaeological world. Of course, he wasn't in the entertainment industry. As long as it wasn't a sex crime, no one would care about his personal style. Therefore, no one would criticize his personal style. He'd been involved in scandals with his assistant, students, parents, and even celebrities. To deal with his romantic luck, he'd spent a lot. If he wants to attack, Mr. Wenger should be able to find the time at any time. Tomorrow afternoon, then. Oh, there's something that Mr. Chen should prepare. What is it? If Mr. Chen plans to meet Mr. Shilai Wenger at home, it's best to ask the women at home to leave. What? He's prejudiced against women? No. He's just too passionate toward women, especially young and beautiful ones. Okay, I understand. American society was so open. Chun Zhao had seen all kinds of people, even a super director like Steven, who seemed great and pure in the eyes of outsiders. He was also very knowledgeable about women. Many female stars in Hollywood had relationships with him. From A-list to B-list, there were more than 2 digits. Therefore, Chun Zhao wasn't surprised at all. Chapter 28-27. Chun Zhao looked at the old man who'd come with Falui Lysander. The old man almost had a penis hanging from his mouth. From the moment he'd entered the restaurant, he'd been searching for pretty waitresses. Then, he walked in Chun Zhao's direction. Suddenly, he went in another direction and went straight for a pretty waitress. "Hi, ma'am. Can I have your number?" Handsome men were popular, even if the man was almost 100 years old. As long as you knew how to take care of yourself, you'd have a different sensory experience. Anyway, you'd be very handsome. Chun Zhao wasn't in a hurry. He rested a hand on his temple and leaned against the window. Chun Zhao listened to Falui Lysander's suggestion. To avoid beating up a 99-year-old man at home, he decided to meet outside. After a few minutes, the old man didn't seem to have a smooth conversation with the waitress. After the slap, the old man walked up to Chun Zhao, embarrassed. "Mr. Chun, hello." "Hello." Chun Zhao stood up and shook hands with the old man. "Let's talk business outside." "Also, waitress." After the old man called out, the waitress who'd slapped him walked up. "How may I help you?" "I'd like an Australian steak and a West Coast lobster, a glass of orange juice, a roast goose, and some cow mushrooms with French snails." The old man looked at Chun Zhao. "Mr. Chun, do you mind if I order more?" "Of course not. Go ahead." When the waitress left, she mumbled something. She probably didn't say anything nice. "Mr. Chun, I heard that you wanted to show me some symbols. We have 20 minutes before lunch." The old man was putting the cart before the horse, but if he could solve the problem in 20 minutes, Chun Zhao wouldn't mind his attitude. Chun Zhao took out the picture he'd prepared and handed it to the old man. The moment the old man saw the picture, his eyes widened. Chun Zhao could vaguely feel that the old man had an unusual aura. Chun Zhao looked up at the old man. So, he was a kindred spirit. The old man lifted his head and also looked at Chun Zhao in surprise. This was the first time he'd looked at Chun Zhao so seriously. "Where did you get these pictures from?" "A friend gave me something. I copied them from it." "Have you considered selling it?" "What price can you offer?" $100,000 US. "What do you think?" The old man recalled the number on the check. "Huh, I'm just kidding. Let's continue." "The words on it are the oldest human language," the old man said. "Shouldn't the oldest language be the Oracle Bone script?" Oracle Bone inscriptions are hieroglyphics. Even now, the academic community is still debating whether or not the oracle bone inscriptions can be considered a language. This is because the users of the oracle bone inscriptions were the ancestors of mankind. However, they were not considered real humans, but Homo sapiens. The oldest language I'm talking about is the language used by mankind. Mr. Shilai, why have I never heard of this language in the academic world? The old man glanced at Falui Lysander. Because this type of text only circulates within a small circle, and this small circle obviously doesn't include you. Falui Lysander's face turned green and red, clearly infuriated by the old man's words. The old man pointed at Falui's nose and said, "You don't have the right to know. This type of text is called a primitive language. There's no other name for it. It's used to record gods. It's not an ordinary record. In ancient times, there were very, very few humans who mastered it. There might only be a few people in an era. Actually, the inheritance of the primitive language hasn't been cut off. It should be one of the few human cultures that have survived to this day. Even now, it's still circulated within a small circle. Are you one of them? Me? Not really. Huh. The old man's smile contained a lot of meaning. Since Chen Zhao had already confirmed that the old man was also in the same field as him. Every word he said might be filled with deep meaning. But right now, Chen Zhao was more concerned about whether the old man could answer his questions. "Mr. Chen, can I see the real thing?" "Not convenient," Chen Zhao replied with a smile. "Fine." The old man did not insist. At the very least, he did not continue to question or persuade him. He just held the rubbing paper and looked at it. "The content on this is very limited, Mr. Chen, and the content is not complete. The original text needs to be read in full before it can be translated. What I can see now is only a description of God, the nameless God, or the unknown God. There's so much text, but only this much actual content. Primitive writing is a very complicated system of writing. You can't just look at a single character or a single line. You need to interpret the entire text. Adding a character or symbol will change the entire content. So, what I said just now is just some judgment. I can't give a definite explanation. So, if you want me to translate more content, you don't have to think about it. Forcing it would just be nonsense. What if I want to learn the primitive language?" Chen Zhao asked. "Do you know how many years it took me to learn the primitive language?" "How many years?" 40, the old man said. The old man said, "This is also because of my excellent talent. I've taught 10 students, but only one student has learned the primitive language. The other 9 students have spent decades and still can't translate a single sentence." Pretend I didn't say anything. Chen Zhao gave up. He'd be crazy to spend decades learning a language system. "When you've decided and let me see the real thing, then contact me. I can't give you more help now." "I'll think about it," Chen Zhao answered vaguely. "Okay." The old man didn't force him. After talking about business, the dishes were served. The old man started eating as if no one else was around. Falui Lysander realized that the almost 100-year-old man's appetite was so huge. It was several times his own. Just then, Chen Zhao ordered his own portion. It was several times the old man's. Falui Lysander realized that he was the only one who was at the level of a regular person. Both Chen Zhao and the old man had shockingly huge appetites. "Mr. Chen, I didn't know you could eat so much." The old man looked up at Chen Zhao. He hadn't swallowed his food yet. "Not at all. Mr. Shi's appetite surprised me." Chen Zhao also wolfed down his food. Spiritualists usually ate more than regular people, but it was still limited. Except for one type of spiritualist, the strengthening type. For example, Chen Zhao's appetite was inhuman. Chapter 28:28. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Chen. The old man left in a natural and unrestrained manner. Before he left the restaurant, he even flirted with the beautiful waitress of the restaurant. Chen Zhao wiped his mouth slowly and looked at Falui Lysander. Feeling helpless, Falui Lysander took out the check Chen Zhao had given him last night. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen." "No need." Chen Zhao glanced at the check on the table. "It's not your fault." Through the window, he could still see the old man's back as he left. It was obvious that the old man was still holding back. At the same time, he showed interest in the disc and spear in his hand. However, for the time being, the other party did not reveal any hostility. So, Chun Zhao didn't plan on attacking him. Of course, the necessary precautions were still necessary. Who knew if the old man's brain would suddenly spasm? Then, he would resort to unscrupulous means. Shilai Wenger was also thinking. It was clearly impossible to get anything from Chun Zhao through normal means. If the other party was an ordinary person, just an ordinary family, he could spend some money to buy it. However, the other party clearly knew what was good for him. Furthermore, he was rich and generous. Just a casual move was equivalent to 20 years of his normal income. If he wanted to buy something from this kind of person, he would have to throw the bank's money in his face. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to move the other party's heart. Of course, robbing them was also an option. However, it was unknown how strong or weak the other party was. Moreover, robbing others was clearly not his style of doing things. Shilai Wenger didn't even know his background. Furthermore, he was from Huaxia, the most powerful region in the spirit world. Who knew if provoking the other party would provoke a hornet's nest? Shilai Wenger had more or less come into contact with some primitive languages over the years. Therefore, this kind of primitive magic tool was not a peerless treasure. But what really moved Shilai Wenger was there were some very special symbols on the paper Chun Zhao had provided. Shilai Wenger recognized some of the symbols. Those symbols were not as indistinguishable as Shi Wenger said. Shilai Wenger was not sure what the symbols meant. However, these symbols seemed to be very similar to the symbols he had encountered in the process of learning. Suddenly, a black shadow dashed past Shilai Wenger's car. Shilai Wenger slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded several meters on the road. Shilai Wenger looked a little unhappy. He got out of the car to check the situation. "Teacher," a rude voice came from behind Shilai Wenger. Shilai Wenger turned his head and looked behind him. A 2-meter tall man stood less than half a meter behind the car. The tall man was wearing a hood, and his face was covered in scars, which made him look especially ferocious and terrifying. "Teacher, you don't have to do this. You're using the dense blood I write from the start. I need to see how much you've grown in the past 20 years, Shilai Wenger said calmly. Just then, Shilai Wenger's body suddenly emitted a terrifying aura that was thousands of times stronger. Red light suddenly appeared on Drexak's body, blocking the terrifying aura. But he himself took a few steps back. In just a moment, the difference in strength between Shilai Wenger and Drexak was clear. Drexak's face alternated between red and white. "Teacher is indeed a teacher. I thought that I had grown fast enough in the past 20 years, but when I really faced you, I realized that my growth was far from enough." "No, you're already very good. At least you're not dead," Shilai Wenger said with a smile. At the same time, he let down his hair and covered the bloody mark between his brows. Drexak's expression changed again. "Teacher, did you really want to kill me just now? If you didn't block that attack, then I would have killed you. Since you blocked it, then it's considered a pass." Chapter 28-29. Now, take me to see your boss. Drexak didn't expect Shilai Wenger's attitude to change so much. He thought that even if Shilai Wenger didn't kill him, he would at least make him lie in bed for 3 to 5 months. He didn't expect Shilai Wenger to change his mind. But Drexak didn't forget his mission, which was to invite Shilai Wenger to see his boss. Teacher, can I use your car? You didn't drive here?" Drexak was a little embarrassed. In fact, he didn't even consider that he could successfully invite Shilai Wenger. Shilai Wenger was very difficult to deal with. Not only was he difficult to deal with, but he was also terrifyingly powerful. He was also temperamental and difficult to distinguish between good and evil. He was Shilai Wenger's only student. Drexak was the only student who had learned the primitive language. But this wasn't Drexak's luck. It was his misfortune. One night 20 years ago, he met someone. That person was his senior, who used to be Shilai Wenger's student. But his senior was in a wheelchair. Even his tongue wasn't working, and he couldn't speak clearly. But he used those unclear words to illustrate the terrifying side of his teacher. Shilai Wenger had a total of 10 students. Every single one of the previous 8 had died at his hands. The one standing in front of him was completely paralyzed. He was the 9th, and Drexak was Shi Lai Wenger's 10th student. Drexak didn't know why Shi Lai Wenger wanted to kill his senior brothers. But the 9th senior's words were deeply imprinted in Drexak's mind. Then Drexak started to guard against his teacher. But he seemed to be too obvious. Shi Lai Wenger sensed something. This irritated Drexel as well. He decided to make the first move. He made preparations in advance. A trap. Everything went smoothly. Shi Lai Wenger fell into the trap he set. It seemed that everything was under his control. But Drexak was wrong about one thing. That was Shi Lai Wenger's strength. That night, Drexak truly saw how terrifying Shi Lai Wenger was. It was also on that night that Shi Lai Wenger left a shadow on Drexak's body and mind that he would not be able to erase for 20 years. All the scars on Drexak's body came from that night. For the sake of this meeting, Drexak had prepared himself mentally for 20 years. He felt that he was strong enough to face Shi Lai Wenger. But that was the truth. What they felt might not be right. It was like an illusion in the game. I felt like I could counterattack. The outcome today was no different from that of 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Shi Lai Wenger said to him, who was covered in cuts and bruises, "To prove that I don't intend to kill you, you can go." The Drexaks crawled on their feet, struggled in the mud, and tumbled into the river. 20 years later, Shi Lai Wenger still showed his generosity and magnanimity. Although what Drexak wanted was not Shi Lai Wenger's generosity. What he wanted was a fair and square victory over Wenger. The strength shown by Shi Lai Wenger had completely destroyed all his courage and confidence. In the end, Drexak still sat in Shi Lai Wenger's car. When Shi Lai Wenger drove, he was like a steady scholar. One of his hands rested on the windowsill, gently stroking his beard. Drexak did not say anything. "When you fought with me just now, you seem to have used a power that did not belong to what I taught you. Did it come from your boss?" Drexak was shocked. He had only exchanged one move with him. It was not even one move, but Shi Lai had actually sensed it. This kind of ability already made him gasp in amazement. It could even be said that it made Drexak afraid. "Don't be nervous. I don't intend to ask about your boss. After all, I will be able to see him soon, right?" Drexak remained silent, but his expression was extremely gloomy. "Do you think that I have been hiding things?" Shi Lai Wenger asked with a chuckle. "Is that not the case?" Shi Lai Wenger shook his head. "No, I have never hidden anything from you or your previous 9 students. I have taught you everything that I can and what you are willing to learn. At this time, are you planning to give me an explanation for what you have done in the past? Or are you planning to tell me that it was a scam?" "No, it is true that I killed them, and I was the one who initiated it." Shi Lai Wenger did not deny it. He was not trying to deny it. What did they do wrong? They did nothing wrong. 3 of them were raised by me. They were like my own children. Shi Lai Wenger's tone was still calm. "Although I was reluctant, I still killed them." Drexak did not understand. He raised his children with all his heart, taught them knowledge, and then killed them? What was going on? Even if he was a bloodthirsty person, he would not specifically target those close to him, right? And you, to be honest, you were the worst of my 10 students. Cruel, cold, and treacherous, but I did not kill you. Do you know why? Drexak shook his head, indicating that he did not understand. The senior who was completely paralyzed was the same. Shi Lai Wenger knew that he was still alive, but he had no intention of continuing to kill him. Logically speaking, he had treated Shi Lai Wenger like that. He should be the one who deserved to die the most for sneak attacking Shi Lai Wenger. But he had survived. It is hard to understand, isn't it? Shi Lai Wenger said with a smile. "Because you're the only one who has mastered the primitive language. None of my previous 9 students have mastered it. They could not even master 1/5 of the content. That is why they deserve to die. Number 9 is slightly better. If you hadn't appeared, he would have been my best successor. He had already grasped 50% of the primordial language. However, because of your excellence and excellence, he was completely paralyzed and lived on as a backup. If he could really inherit all of my knowledge, then he could die in peace. However, you didn't do it perfectly. Although you have all kinds of shortcomings, your talent in the field of language saved you. Drexak did not expect that to be the reason why he was able to survive. If one day, someone who is more talented than me in languages appears, will that be the day I die? Yes. Why? Is this knowledge that important? Of course it is. All these years, you used this knowledge to exchange for power. Is it not enough to prove the value of this knowledge? Net. Apex. Chapter 28:30. Shilai Wenger said in an extremely calm tone as he drove. If you want to learn more, you can come to me at any time. Of course, it's best before I find a better successor. After all, you'll be courting death if you come to me to learn. Shilai Wenger's tone was frighteningly calm. Even Drexak, who had always been lawless and regarded the law as nothing, could not help but feel a chill down his spine. Drexak treated everything as if it were nothing, because he believed that no one could punish him. But Shilai Wenger was different. He had the ability and the motive. Should we go left or right at the fork in front? Right? Your boss really knows how to hide. Is he wanted? He's hiding in the desert. Drexak was obviously in a bad mood, so he did not answer Shilai Wenger's question. The car only stopped when it could not move anymore. The two could only move forward on foot. Drexak naturally did not need to say much. One could tell how good his physique was just by looking at his physique. Shilai Wenger walked rather leisurely. Your boss invited me here. Do we talk about pay or something? Don't tell me that we just met. I don't have a good temper. My boss doesn't have a good temper either. Suddenly, Shilai Wenger stopped in his tracks. He frowned and looked at the empty desert in front of him. Drexak turned around in surprise and looked at Shilai Wenger. Did he notice? When he first came, he could not feel anything. He did not expect Shilai Wenger to be able to notice something unusual here. Drexak took out a unique badge. The moment he injected magic into the badge, the empty desert in front of him seemed to have been unzipped, and a gap of hundreds of meters appeared. Let's go in. Amazing, truly amazing. Your boss is actually so generous. Who is he? Won't you know after you go in? Shilai Wenger, who had been calm all this while, hesitated. The other party's generosity had already given him a show of strength. From this, it could be seen that the other party's status and strength were not ordinary. Under normal circumstances, Shilai Wenger was confident that he could escape even if he couldn't win. However, it was of such a scale, and it was such a special alternate space. Shilai Wenger was not sure that he could escape. Shilai Wenger knew that he was one of the best in the world. However, he would not naively believe that he was invincible. There were still many mysterious experts in this world. These experts did not show themselves. Some of them lived in seclusion in the mountains, while others hid in the city. Usually, he looked like an ordinary person, but when they felt it was necessary, everything would be different. Drexak glanced at Shilai Wenger and couldn't help but show some pride. What, are you scared? Shilai Wenger smiled. Unfortunately, this is not the fear you gave me. After that, Shilai Wenger strode into the crack. The crack closed like a zipper. The moment Shilai Wenger stepped into the alternate dimension, the surrounding scenery had already changed. This was no longer a desolate desert, but layers upon layers of mountains. Clouds filled the air. Among the mountains, one could vaguely see towering peaks. However, in the distance, one could see an indescribably towering peak. Shilai Wenger frowned again. This alternate dimension was far bigger than he had imagined. It was vaster than any alternate dimension he had seen before, and the spiritual energy here was unimaginably abundant. Shilai Wenger gazed into the distance. There was a trace of aura, obscure and small, but hard to ignore. Although it seemed insignificant, Shilai Wenger sensed danger from the aura. Where do we go? Shilai Wenger turned to look at Drexak. That highest peak is our destination, Drexak said. Looks like we have to go far. Not far. Drexak took the lead and climbed the first peak. There was a huge platform at the top of the peak. On the platform, there was a huge array made of white rock. Shilai Wenger looked at the array on the ground. Is this the astral teleportation in Olympian mythology? How did you know? Drexak looked at Shilai Wenger in surprise. Have you forgotten? I am the world's best archaeologist and theologian. One of them, Drexak, corrected him. Teacher, in the past 20 years, I've traveled the entire world. I've also met many scholars. Their knowledge is no less than yours. Shilai Wenger smiled faintly and did not argue with the student. It was not Drexak's first time activating a teleportation array. He was very familiar with it. In an instant, a beam of light shone down from the clouds and enveloped the two of them. The next moment, Shilai Wenger found himself in the center of another unfamiliar building. He was also standing in an astral teleportation array. However, there were stone pillars erected around the teleportation array. From these stone pillars, one could clearly distinguish the theme here. It was definitely in the style of Olympian mythology. Right in front of the teleportation array was a building similar to the Parthenon Temple. However, this building was more magnificent and spectacular. The aura that made him feel a sense of danger also became clearer here. Drexak did not speak, but his expression became more sincere and serious. Shilai Wenger straightened his collar and walked straight into the temple. The entire temple was extremely spacious. White pillars hung above the main hall. At the end of the hall was a stone seat. There was a man on the stone seat. He was wearing a white robe and a golden crown. He looked simple but noble. He had a full beard and his golden hair was coiled up. The man rested one hand on his temple. He seemed to be in a deep sleep. From the man's figure, one could tell that he was not human. Even Drexak would seem insignificant in front of him. He was nearly 4 meters tall when he was sitting. If he stood up, he would probably be around 6 meters tall. Shilai Wenger stared at the giant in front of him. The dangerous aura was coming from him. Boss, I have brought my teacher, Shilai Wenger, according to your instructions. Drexak's voice was loud and clear, echoing in the hall. The man on the stone seat opened his eyes slightly. Shilai Wenger saw that the man's eyes were pure gold. There were no pupils or whites. Chapter 28:31. As the wisest and most knowledgeable human in the world, do you know who I am? The golden-eyed giant spoke in the purest form of ancient Greek. Shilai Wenger took a deep breath and said, "The god of war, Ares." Shilai Wenger himself was shocked and incredulous by this answer. He was actually facing Ares, the god of war in the Olympian mythology. What an incredible experience. But all the signs in the giant in front of him were very similar to the legendary god of war, Ares, in the legends, texts, and ancient books. They were almost identical. Shilai Wenger had to accept his own conclusion. The little giant in front of him was really the god of war, Ares. "You are the first human to remain calm when you see me," Ares said in a gentle tone. "You're not the first god I've met. Although some existences aren't really gods, or are just weak gods born from some kind of faith, you're not alone in being called a god." Shilai Wenger's answer was neither humble nor arrogant. One could not even feel his inner turmoil. "Then are you curious why I asked you to come?" "Yes," Shilai Wenger replied. Ares pulled open his white robe and revealed his right arm. His right arm looked a little shrunken. There were many red, gold, and black runes on it. Primitive words. Shilai Wenger turned to look at Drexak. Those primitive words should have been inscribed by Drexak for Ares. However, Drexak's skills were obviously not up to par, so it did not achieve the desired effect. "This is... My divine power has been stolen," Ares said. "Now I have lost 2/3 of my divine power, and it is still flowing. I need to stop this process." Shilai Wenger could not help but be surprised when he heard Ares' words. Stealing divine power. Could this be done? If he could, he wanted to do it too. But the thought of it was dangerous, especially Ares, who had been robbed once before. He must have taken precautions in this regard. So doing the same thing again would probably be hundreds or thousands of times more difficult. What about my reward? In return, I will teach you how to obtain and use divine power. Of course, I will also give you a lifespan equivalent to your current age. Shilai Wenger was tempted by the generous reward, but Shilai Wenger did not agree immediately, because their relationship was not equal. Therefore, the initiative of this transaction would lose its balance. Whether he would be able to get his reward or not would depend on the other party. Shilai Wenger did not like this kind of deal. What? Are you not satisfied? Aries stood high above, his golden eyes fixed on Shilai Wenger. I agree to the payment, but I have another condition. What condition? I want something, but it's in someone else's hands. I need you to get it for me. Also, I have a general understanding of your situation. I can solve your problem, but the place to dispel the magic has to be my home, not here. Aries thought about it and nodded. Sure. Dressack, go and fetch that thing for your master. Yes, boss. I thought he would be your servant, but Dressack only calls you boss, Shilai Wenger said. I have already been betrayed by my servant once, so I don't need a servant anymore. I've already been betrayed by my servants once, so I don't need servants anymore. Whether it's between humans and gods, or between gods and gods, the only thing that won't betray is profit. That's why I only need an employer-employee relationship. I'll hire Dressack, and he'll work for me. I'll give him benefits. That's enough. Dressack is a very opinionated person. He doesn't need a god or a master to guide his life. All he lacks is power. It seemed that Aries was also a person who had suffered losses. Therefore, he was very clear in this regard. Dressack was very smart, so Aries was very easy to use. This surprised Shilai Wenger. Most of the gods he had seen in the past were arrogant, rude, and condescending. Even if they were not as strong as him, they still had the mentality that all living beings were ants. On the contrary, he rather admired Aries, who he thought was superior. It seemed that Aries was also a god who had been beaten up by life. It was very easy to change a god's bad habit. Beating him was more effective than any preaching. Aries now knew how to compromise. Gods were not invincible, although it was difficult to change what was in Aries' bones. But he would no longer say silly things like, "It's your honor that I give you face." "Teacher, when do you need it?" "The sooner the better. I can start when I get what I need." Shilai Wenger looked at Aries. Then, "Your Excellency, God of War, can you come with me for a walk outside? If you have no restrictions." "Of course, my pleasure." The moment Aries stood up, his aura and the surrounding air stagnated. Shilai Wenger looked at Aries seriously. He had to admit that the strength he was proud of. In front of this legendary god, it was really not worth mentioning. The difference between a human and a god was indeed not something that could be made up by talent. Aries was not bound to a situation where he could only be in a different space. He could move freely. Shilai Wenger's request for Aries to leave this alternate dimension was actually to test him. Of course, it was also for his own safety. If Aries wanted to get rid of him after solving the problem, it was almost impossible to escape in this space. But if it was outside, in his own home, then the problem would not be a problem anymore. At least, he would not be without a way to protect himself. Although Aries was in big trouble right now. If one only looked at his appearance, they would not be able to see any big problems. After leaving the space, Aries also turned into a normal person's body. Then he got into Shilai Wenger's car and went to his home. "Teacher, give me that person's information and address." "Wait, I'll ask someone." Shilai Wenger then took out his phone and dialed Falui Lysander's number. After some small talk, Shilai Wenger went straight to the point. Falui Lysander wasn't too guarded against Shilai Wenger, so he quickly sent the information to Shilai Wenger. Chapter 2832. Mr. Chun, Mr. Shilai Wenger seems to want to visit you. He just asked me about you and your address. I gave it to him. Falui Lysander knew the rules. Although he had given Shilai Wenger Chun Zhao's address, Lysander still knew the rules. Although he'd given Chun Zhao's address, he immediately called Chun Zhao. Okay, got it. Chun Zhao didn't think too much about it. At night, the children returned home one after another. The house became lively again. A few older children were playing in the water. Otherwise, they would chase the family pets everywhere. Little Larissa had been playing all day and was sleepy now. That was how children worked. They ate when they were hungry, slept when they were tired, and played when they woke up. To them, there was no difference between day and night. For this, Chun Zhao even bought a monitoring watch. It was similar to the current health watch. Chun Zhao and little Larissa each wore one. It was used to monitor little Larissa's schedule. As soon as she woke up, Chun Zhao would receive a message. Now, some families would use such equipment. Of course, the price of the equipment was not cheap, so the people who used this kind of monitor were mostly middle-class or wealthier families. Little Larissa had a high chance of waking up at night. In comparison, little Jerlin's schedule was much more stable. It was mainly because of her abnormal vitality. Other than eating and sleeping, she couldn't stop playing. Fei Lai practiced yoga on the lawn. She felt that she'd gained weight in the past 2 days. Chun Zhao was speechless. 0.085 kilograms. You call that fat? Plus, you're a lifeguard, okay? Look at how much you exercise. Why don't you put on some weight? All right, no matter what, don't try to reason with your woman. Chun Zhao felt that Fei Lai just wanted to practice yoga. That was all. Recently, Kilo had been training weights. He'd started using the barbells Chun Zhao used in the past. Of course, it was the 2-ton barbells, but he used them as dumbbells. Kilo's power came from bloodline, not magic. He was a Roma, but that didn't mean he was pure human. After all, Roma were a migrating race. In the process, they'd mixed up the bloodlines of most people in the world. So, Roma had all kinds of bloodlines. Basically, it was a hodgepodge of bloodlines. Anyway, the kid had shocking potential. At least, Chun Zhao had high hopes for Kilo. "Uncle, spar with me for a while." Outside, Crow shouted at the top of his lungs. Chun Zhao stood up and walked into the yard. "Kilo, I don't want to kill you." Pair training? Kilo's strength was already extremely shocking for an ordinary person. But for Chun Zhao, it was far from enough. In Chun Zhao's eyes, Kilo was no different from an ordinary person. They were all ants. Chun Zhao should restrain his power and spar with Kilo. It was like asking an adult to control his strength and an ant to practice boxing. "Uncle, I'm not asking you to attack me. I just want you to be my punching bag." Chun Zhao's face twitched. "I think it's more interesting to attack each other." Chun Zhao waved his fist. The wind howled. Kaluo felt his scalp tingle. He had no intention of courting death. He would kneel on the spot if he was even grazed by the wind from Chun Zhao's punch, let alone a single hit. Forget it then. Kaluo turned to flee. Just then, Chun Zhao suddenly looked outside. Here comes your punching bag." Crow was stunned for a moment and turned around in confusion. "What? Follow me." Kaluo followed Chun Zhao to the door. A tall man stood at the door. He was even bigger than Gaia. One had to know that Gaia's physique was already strong enough to fight in heavyweight boxing. But this man was even bigger. But just as frightening as his size was his face. Kaluo could clearly sense the hostility emanating from this man. Kaluo frowned. He vaguely understood what Chun Zhao meant. But Kaluo wasn't afraid at all. With Chun Zhao's support, he would even dare to punch a dragon. "Uncle, do you want me to hit him?" Kaluo asked, looking up. "Yes." Chun Zhao nodded. Duresak didn't plan on hiding his intentions this time, but he didn't expect Chun Zhao to be even more direct. Not only did Chun Zhao notice his hostility, but he also wanted a child to fight him. A child to fight him? Drexak's expression immediately turned gloomy. He twisted his neck. He didn't plan on telling Chun Zhao how dangerous he was. He wanted to use his actions to prove that not only was he dangerous, but he was also cruel. Smiling, Chun Zhao looked at Duresak. "You'll have to suffer a bit." "No, not at all," Duresak said nonchalantly. He was about to attack when he suddenly realized that he couldn't move. Duresak looked at Chun Zhao in surprise. "What's going on? What spell is this? A confinement spell? When did Chun Zhao cast it?" Duresak wanted to break free. As far as he was concerned, he had 100 ways to break free from this imprisonment spell. However, he soon realized that something seemed to be wrong. "Okay, Kaluo, you can go." Kaluo took 2 steps forward and looked back at Chun Zhao. "Uncle, I won't kill him, right?" "No. His body is stronger than yours. It won't be easy for you to kill him." "Oh, that's good." Kaluo, go. Just then, the children playing in the yard also noticed the situation at the door. They all climbed onto the fence and cheered loudly. Fei Lai also noticed the situation and shouted, "Chun, this is the door. Don't make it too bloody." Chun Zhao shrugged. "Don't worry. I won't do anything today." Duresac was angry. He was angry at Chun Zhao and the group's arrogance. However, he couldn't do anything about the confinement on his body. Duresac was at his wit's end. It seemed that he could only use his ultimate move. A bloody slit appeared on Duresac's forehead. The dense blood I had just opened. Duresac felt that his neck was being pulled and twisted by an invisible force. It was as if his neck was going to break. The intense pain and the sense of impending death caused the eye of dense blood that Duresac had just activated to be interrupted. "Don't scare my children. You better behave." Chun Zhao's voice appeared in Duresac's ears. At this moment, Duresac realized it. Chun Zhao was far more powerful than he'd imagined. From start to finish, Chun Zhao's hands were in his pockets, but he couldn't even move. This was something that he'd never experienced before. "Very good. It seems that you already know the rules here. If you dare to cast any dangerous spells here, I'll twist your head off." Chapter 28:33. Duresac was still struggling in the dark, but very soon he gave up. In fact, he'd even used primitive words. But even primitive words couldn't break free. Bang! Kilo smashed his fist heavily into Duresac's abdomen. Duresac grunted softly. He wanted to tear the kid in front of him to pieces. But he couldn't even move a finger now. "Kilo, it's not enough. You can open up more. This guy can take a beating." After all, Kilo was still a kid. He knew how terrifying his strength was. He was worried that if he used too much force, it wouldn't just be an injury. He might pierce through Duresac. Thus, he didn't dare to use too much strength. He didn't even dare to use 1/5 of his strength. Kilo punched again. This time, it was a little heavier, but only a little heavier. This punch caused Duresac to completely explode with power. Roar! The Duresac growled, and a red rune suddenly appeared on its arm. This red rune then turned into dozens of smaller red runes, continuously twining around the Duresac's arm before finally returning to his arm. Duresac's arm instantly exploded with hundreds of times its original strength. Finally, Duresac's arm broke free, and he suddenly grabbed at Kilo. But before his hand could touch Kilo, it was grabbed by someone else. Duresac looked at Chun Zhao and sneered inwardly. Chun Zhao really didn't know how to live to grab his hand now. Right now, Duresac's strength was limitless. No one could withstand his current strength. But the next moment, he suddenly heard a crisp sound coming from his arm. Broken. Chun Zhao broke Duresac's arm just like that. Duresac exploded. How come his limitless strength didn't have any effect on Chun Zhao at all? "Kilo, go in. You don't have to participate anymore." Chun Zhao patted Kilo's head. Just then, Dadaira, who was sitting on the fence, also pulled her brother and sister. "Go in, or else we'll have nightmares again tonight." Dadaira was already at a sensible age. She knew how to solve problems for Chun Zhao and Fei Lai. Chun Zhao finally let go of Duresac's restraint. Duresac was still unwilling to give up. He looked at his numb right arm. At this time, green runes appeared on his body and fused into his arms. The arm that Chun Zhao had broken actually recovered. "What? Aren't you going to use your weird binding spell?" Duresac stared at Chun Zhao viciously. "If we're talking about weird, your magic is even weirder. I've never seen magic like this before." "My magic? This isn't just strange. You'll soon see the terrifying side of this magic." Chun Zhao lifted a finger and pointed at the air. Pop! Duresac's body suddenly lost control and crashed backwards. With a whooshing sound, Duresac discovered that all the bones in his body had been shattered. The runes on his body began to appear once more. They circled around his body and rapidly healed the damage on his body. Duresac stood up with difficulty. Chun Zhao also walked up to him. Pop! It was the same move again, and Duresac crashed into the slope. Chun Zhao did the same thing again. The ground on which Duresac lay cracked. Pop! Pop! The runes on Duresac's body no longer appeared. Chun Zhao stood before him. He kept using the same move to beat Duresac until he lost his temper. "Tell me, what's so terrifying about your magic?" Duresac was coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. Many things were relative. For example, the horror of primitive words was only for regular cultivators. Clearly, Chun Zhao wasn't one of them. Drexak's pupils finally revealed fear. The man before him wasn't just powerful. He was also cruel. His smile didn't change at all. From start to finish, he was still smiling cruelly. But what he couldn't accept the most was that Chun Zhao had only used one finger. It was really just a finger. This made him doubt whether he was really powerful. If he was, how could he be beaten to a pulp by Chun Zhao's finger? Chun Zhao lifted his finger and Drexak was pulled up uncontrollably. It was this feeling again. His body was bound by that power. Did Mr. Shilai Wenger send you? Yes, Drexak answered decisively. He didn't have any feelings for Shilai Wenger, so he naturally wouldn't protect him. He also felt that it would be best if Chun Zhao and Shilai Wenger could fight to the death and both of them would be injured. At the very least, he would be able to escape with Ares at the bottom. Then are you willing to take me to him? Sure. How long have you been awake? Shilai Wenger asked as he prepared. About 3 years, Ares said. Ares said, 3 years ago, I was awakened from the underground palace, and then I took that person as my believer and servant, and gave him divine power, but he turned around and used the divine power I gave him to deal with me. Your curse isn't that troublesome, Ares said. It could be solved even without primitive words. Why did it drag on until now? Shilai Wenger asked. I looked for 2 people. Both of them had the ability to remove the curse on me, but their asking price was too high, Ares said. Then I met Drexak, and he recommended you to me. What if I asked for too high a price? Or did he reject your request? Die, Ares answered. I won't let my information get out. Shilai Wenger's movements paused, and he hesitated slightly. Ares seemed to feel Shilai Wenger's hesitation. Don't worry, he said. Gods can't lie. As long as it's a promise, it has to be fulfilled. Even the god of conspiracy isn't allowed to lie. You should have a way to verify if I'm lying. Plus, I have a way to prevent you from spreading my information. Fine. Shilai Wenger shrugged. Ares' words made sense. Even if Shilai Wenger really wanted to kill him, in his current state, he couldn't kill Shilai Wenger with one blow. He still had a chance to escape. Aren't you going to help me solve my curse after Drexak brings back your reward? Drexak has improved a lot these years, Shilai Wenger said. But his efficiency has slowed down a lot. I thought he would have brought it back by now. With your strength, you can go and get it yourself if you really need that thing. Chapter 28:34. Shilai Wenger chuckled. How could it be the same for him and Drexak? Shilai Wenger still attached great importance to his status and reputation in society. Killing and robbing was something that others could do for him. He would never do it himself. With his ability, it was easy for him to go to a rich person's house. But there would definitely be surveillance cameras of all sizes. Those things were too troublesome. His identity could be exposed at any time. So, Shilai Wenger wouldn't do it himself. But Drexak was different. It was Chun Zhao's fault. He'd let Drexak continue to bear the blame. Anyway, many people in the spiritual world knew that Drexak had betrayed his master. They wouldn't suspect Chun Zhao no matter what. He's back. Ares looked outside and suddenly frowned. There's another person. His aura is very weak, but he's not a normal person. Shilai Wenger raised an eyebrow. He couldn't feel it at all. Can't you feel it? It's normal. They're more than 10 kilometers away. Drexak seems to be in trouble, Ares said calmly. His aura is very unstable. He's injured? Yes. Seems like your target is more troublesome than I thought. Ares was unhurried. Although he wasn't in his best condition, he was still the god of war, a high and mighty god. Drexak couldn't solve it, but it didn't mean that he couldn't. Finally, Shilai Wenger also felt Drexak and the other person's aura. It's him. Seems like I underestimated him. He can actually hurt Drexak like this. Seems like you still care about Drexak. As his teacher and my approved student, of course I have to stand up for him, Shilai Wenger said matter-of-factly. Chun Zhao drove into a shady farm. When he reached the fence, he stopped and dragged Drexak down. Just then, he saw Shilai Wenger and another person waiting for him in front of the house. Chun Zhao glanced at Shilai Wenger and then at Ares. Chun Zhao tossed Drexak aside and strode toward the two. God, Olympian God. Chen Zhao's voice was rather loud. I didn't expect to meet another Olympian god. Shilai Wenger was a bit surprised that Chen Zhao could recognize Ares at first glance. Shilai Wenger took a few steps forward and walked toward Chen Zhao. However, Chen Zhao's attention was not on Shilai Wenger at all. Facing Shilai Wenger, who was walking toward him, Chen Zhao had no intention of stopping. He continued to stride forward. Shilai Wenger smiled. Chen. Shilai Wenger suddenly flew to the left and knocked over the fence. Shilai Wenger was dumbfounded. He stood up and looked at Chen Zhao. He realized that Chen Zhao had no intention of paying attention to him. Instead, he walked up to Ares. Excitement was written all over that face. Ares frowned. He didn't like the way Chen Zhao looked at him. This kind of gaze was very lascivious, as if he was looking at prey, a toy, or something else. There was not the slightest bit of respect or fear. Arrogant bastard. Ares raised his right arm, and a golden sword appeared in his hand. Ares slashed down at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao raised his hand and grabbed the blade of the golden sword. Clang! In an instant, the golden halo exploded and instantly rushed forward. The main building and cowshed in the ranch collapsed instantly. Shilai Wenger, who had just stood up, was sent back to the ground by the impact. Ares also took a few steps back. He also stared at Chen Zhao in shock. Chen Zhao's face was filled with an excited smile. You better not resist. Last time, it was also an Olympian god. I couldn't hold it in and didn't even leave a corpse. I hope you won't force me. Chen Zhao's eyes were almost bursting with light. Shilai Wenger's face was extremely pale. Who was this Huaxia man? He couldn't even block one move from him. Moreover, he didn't show any fear when facing Ares. Instead, he seemed to be in high spirits. Human, you've won my respect. Who are you? Ares said coldly. I don't need your respect. Chen Zhao looked at Ares. Especially now that you're so weak. You're much weaker than that titan from last time. Ares' expression changed again. Just then, a crack suddenly appeared behind Ares. Ares took the opportunity to lie back, and, at the same time, the crack closed. Clearly, fighting Chen Zhao was a very unwise decision. Therefore, he couldn't care about Shilai Wenger now. First, he had to leave this place and get away from Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao was also somewhat shocked. You're an Olympian god, after all. Can you be a little more shameless? Don't run away just because of a disagreement. Chen Zhao immediately reached out with both hands and grabbed the spatial crack that was about to close. But the moment he grabbed the crack, he felt a terrifying, constricting force. It could be said that if someone else were to grab the crack, they would definitely be crushed in an instant. Open! Chen Zhao yelled, using all his strength to open the crack. Shilai Wenger's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. In all these years, this was the first time he had seen someone tear open a spatial crack with brute force. But Chen Zhao's method also surprised Ares. Ares sneered and raised his arms high in the air. Instantly, the spatial crack enveloped Chen Zhao and the entire farm. Chen Zhao immediately sensed something strange. Domain. No, it's not a domain. What's with this pressure? Human, you're stronger than I expected, but aren't you looking down on me? Or are you looking down on the Olympian gods? I'm Ares, the god of war. Even in my weak state, I'm not someone you can offend. At the moment, Ares didn't seem weak at all. Instead, he was filled with majesty and vastness. His voice echoed in the air. As for you, you jumped into my divine kingdom. In my divine kingdom, I am everything. I am the heaven and earth. No one can defeat me in my divine kingdom. Divine kingdom? This was the first time Chen Zhao had heard of this term. What was a divine kingdom? Shilai Wenger glanced at Drexak. Drexak was heavily injured, but it wasn't fatal. This was also thanks to his extraordinary constitution. At the same time, Chen Zhao didn't kill him. Wake up, my warriors, Ares shouted. Instantly, the surrounding mountains started collapsing. Huge giants stood up from the bottom of the mountains. One by one, the rock soldiers stood up from the ground. Chapter 28:35. The scene was grand enough. The giants were of different heights. The big ones might be thousands of meters tall, while the small ones were close to 1,000 meters tall. there were also the millions of rock soldiers. Each of them had an imposing aura, like rivers converging into an ocean. However, there weren't any holy armors like the ones Chun Zhao had seen before. Even the smallest of the giants was probably bigger than the Dragon Emperor. Size didn't represent power, but it still determined part of the difference in power. What did giants thousands of meters tall look like? Civil airplanes could only fly about 10,000 meters. If the tallest giants were outside, they could slap civil airplanes down with just their arms. Shilai Wenger and Drexak's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Was this a god? Was this the power of a god? But what Qin Zhao really cared about was that the giant bodies were alive. They weren't made of energy or rock. They were made of flesh and blood. In other words, it truly existed in this world. Or rather, they had once existed in this world. Titan, the legendary Titan? In Olympian mythology, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades had taken divine authority from their fathers, the Titans. Of course, they might not be. After all, there were many giants in Olympian mythology. The giants' bodies were alive, but they didn't have souls. Qin Zhao guessed that they were probably some kind of puppet made by Ares. This kind of spell wasn't rare in the spiritual world. It wasn't strange to make living people or powerful cultivators into puppets either. Losers. They're all losers, defeated by me. Now they become my soldiers, my weapons. You will become one of them. Qin Zhao wasn't surprised. As the son of Zeus, Ares was one of the 12 Olympians. At the same time, he was also the fourth generation of the Olympian gods. In the battle where the Olympian gods, led by Zeus, overthrew his father, Kronos, Ares was one of the main forces. So, it was understandable that he defeated some titans. Then, as your collection, how much of their power can they use? Qin Zhao asked casually. All of them. The strongest among them can even compete with me at my peak, and in my divine kingdom, they have all the power. When Qin Zhao heard Ares' words, he also caught the main point in his words. Divine kingdom. When they were outside, just now, Ares obviously didn't want to fight him. However, after entering the god's kingdom, Ares' confidence soared. He kept saying that he could not be defeated in the god's kingdom. Therefore, Qin Zhao became cautious. He wasn't sure what this divine kingdom could be used for. Back then, the Hercules was also defeated by me at his peak. Now, you are as weak as a bitch that has just given birth. Do you really think that you could defeat me with these soulless marionettes? Don't compare me to that demigod. I'm an overgod. Any arrogance you have will be torn to pieces in my divine kingdom. Here, Mr. Ares, he's trying to get information out of you. Shilai Wenger reminded. Qin Zhao turned around and glared at Shilai Wenger threateningly. Shilai Wenger felt goosebumps at Qin Zhao's threat. However, there was a clear distinction between them now. Anyway, Qin Zhao wouldn't let him have it easy, so he didn't need to hide their relationship. Oomph. Hearing Shilai Wenger's name, Ares only snorted. He had the glory of a god, but he also knew that speaking too much was bound to make mistakes. Therefore, he didn't explain more to Qin Zhao. Just then, a small titan that was 1,000 meters tall charged over. Every time he took a step, the ground would shake violently. When he was 1,000 meters away from Qin Zhao, he leaped high and raised his fists above his head. Crimson light exploded from his fists. It was as if he was holding a sun. In the end, he had unstoppable power. He smashed toward Qin Zhao. Boom! Instantly, the ground rippled like a lake. A terrifying impact swept in all directions. Shilai Wenger immediately went to Drexak and helped him block the impact. However, everything around him disappeared in the impact. Shilai Wenger was speechless. This terrifying destructive power was simply unheard of. If this attack had landed in the city outside, this attack could probably destroy an entire street. It would probably only take a dozen rounds to destroy Los Angeles. But the next moment, the huge body of the Titan suddenly flipped over. Qin Zhao returned a punch to the 1,000-meter Titan. Shilai Wenger and Drexak were both dumbfounded. Wenger, you knew that guy was this strong? Shilai Wenger glanced at Drexak and didn't speak. However, his eyes had already said what he was thinking. Do I look like someone with water in my head? If I knew he was this terrifying, I wouldn't have provoked him no matter what, even if he had a divine artifact in his hand. Chun Zhao was about to chase after him when a shadow suddenly enveloped him. A palm even larger than the 1,000-meter giant came crashing over. The largest titan launched an attack at him. Chun Zhao turned his head and glanced at it. He raised his right palm, wanting to press it down. The largest titan's palm was blocked in the air. Under Chun Zhao's control, Chun Zhao's small world formed a force that blocked the attack. At the same time, a dozen black balls formed in Chun Zhao's left palm. Pop, pop, pop. In an instant, the dozen black balls shot at the largest titan at the same time. The largest titan didn't dodge. He couldn't dodge either. His gigantic body gave him unparalleled destructive power, but it also turned him into a huge target. The moment the dozen or so black balls hit the largest titan, they had already penetrated his skin. Each black ball had a mass of 10 million tons. Their huge mass made them almost unstoppable. Not even the legendary titans could do it. The small black ball exploded after shooting into the body of the largest titan. In an instant, a dozen blood flowers exploded on the largest titan's body. Blood poured down like a torrential downpour. But if it were a normal person, it would definitely be fatal. However, the largest titan was unmoved by this. He opened his huge mouth and a white beam of light shot at Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao instantly raised his speed to the maximum. He turned into a ball of energy and dodged the white beam. At the same time, he went for the largest titan's head. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the largest titan's head was smashed by Chun Zhao. But the largest titan still didn't fall. Its headless body continued to attack Chun Zhao. Chapter 28:36. Chun Zhao's eyes hardened, and he pressed his palms down. In an instant, the surrounding titans collapsed to the ground. Their bodies were crushed by the immense force. At this moment, the Rock-Earth Legion was directly crushed into pieces. In Ares' divine kingdom, the only ones who had real combat power were himself and a dozen titans. As for the Rocky Earth army, they looked imposing. In reality, they couldn't even get involved in this battle. For example, what was happening now? Before they could even touch Chun Zhao, half of them were smashed by Chun Zhao with a single slap. Even the smaller titans were slapped down by Chun Zhao with a single slap. Only the largest titans could barely exchange a few blows with Chun Zhao, but they could only exchange a few blows. But this wasn't what gave Chun Zhao a headache. What really gave Chun Zhao a headache was that the titans' bodies couldn't be destroyed. No, it wasn't that they couldn't be destroyed. It was that no matter how Chun Zhao destroyed them, even if they were smashed into pieces, they could still recover. Was this the power of the divine kingdom? Recover their bodies? Ares, on the other hand, stood high above the clouds. He looked down at the battle below. It was as if he wasn't involved. The intense battle below seemed to have nothing to do with him. The more Chun Zhao thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. At the same time, Chun Zhao released his little world completely and enveloped the titans. Chun Zhao repeated the same process again and again. Destroy the titans, then they would be reborn. Destroy them again, then reborn again. This went on, as if there was no end to it. Again, the titan that Chun Zhao had destroyed started to recover from its feet, then its body, then its head. Once again, he stood before Chun Zhao and scathed. Suddenly, Chun Zhao's eyes lit up. A myth popped up in his mind. It was a legend about Hercules, who had once been defeated by Chun Zhao. Hercules had once killed a god who was close to invincible. It was Antaeus, the child of the earth goddess Gaia, and Poseidon. As long as he stood on the ground, he had endless power. Antaeus was a cruel ruler. He forced everyone who passed through his territory to fight him, and he killed them in the process. Until he met Hercules. Hercules lifted Antaeus high above his head so that he could not touch the ground, and then strangled Antaeus in midair. In Olympian mythology, Zeus is the main character because he is the final victor. The heroine in the Olympian myth was not Zeus's wife, Hera, nor any of Zeus's women, but Zeus's mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-grandmother, Gaia, the goddess of earth. Olympus was the beginning of everything. As the saying goes, the king of gods changes every day, but Gaia is eternal. One of Gaia's hobbies in life was to have sons and then have sons with sons. Gaia gave birth to the first god king, Uranus, who then became her husband. She gave birth to the 12 Titans with Uranus, as well as her youngest son, Cronus. After that, the second king of gods, Kronos, personally sent Uranus off. He also mentioned the curse that was overthrown by his son. After that, it was Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus's 3 brothers, Kronos. Gaia said that it did not matter who the god king was, as they were all her sons. Not only could she give birth, but all her children would definitely be at the top of the world. She could mate with anyone and was at the forefront of genetics. Basically, she could give birth to whoever had the strongest genes. Antaeus was the child she had with her son, grandson, and great-grandson, Poseidon. Of course, if Gaia could give birth, so could Zeus. Zeus was like a moving seeding machine. He was no weaker than Gaia in this aspect. For example, Ares, the god of war, was one. There is also an even more famous one, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. In any case, this household register was a negative course in ethics. Chun Zhao thought of Antaeus. As Gaia's son, he had the bloodline of the Titans. He could absorb endless power from the earth. In that case, the other Titans, who had purer bloodlines than Antaeus, shouldn't be any worse. Not to mention difficult moves like the impure earth reincarnation. It should also be possible to revive from a single cell. So, Chun Zhao suspected that these Titans could not be completely destroyed because of Ares' divine kingdom or because of their Titan bloodline. Chun Zhao pointed at the tallest Titan. Suddenly, he lifted his arm. The Titan's huge body suddenly rose into the sky. Ares' pupils constricted. A huge golden sword suddenly appeared in his hand. He shot it down from the clouds at Chun Zhao. The golden sword struck Chun Zhao's head like a bolt of lightning. But Chun Zhao was unharmed. He only raised his head calmly. Chun Zhao suddenly clenched his fist. The Titan that Chun Zhao had lifted up exploded into pieces. The scene was too horrifying. The Titans were already terrifyingly huge. When they turned into a ball, all their flesh and blood seemed to have been mixed together in a blender. The scene was enough to make anyone's head explode. This was how Shilai Wenger and Drexak felt at the moment. Fuck, is this the guy you want me to deal with? Drexak clenched his teeth and stared at Shilai Wenger. Shilai Wenger was speechless. Indeed, it was too difficult for Drexak to deal with such a monster. The Titan's tens of millions of tons were compressed bit by bit. They became smaller and smaller, but also more and more terrifying. This did not seem to be enough to satisfy Chun Zhao's crazy actions. Chun Zhao's left hand grabbed the air again. Another giant Titan was lifted up and then approached the Titan's flesh that had been compressed into a ball. When the second Titan approached the flesh and blood ball, its body also seemed to be peeled off. His skin, tissues, and blood were all extracted and then absorbed by the flesh and blood ball. When the second Titan's body was completely absorbed into the flesh and blood ball, the flesh and blood did not grow bigger. The sphere of flesh and blood did not grow larger. Instead, it was compressed even smaller. Then the third, the fourth, imagine a dozen Titan giants that weighed millions to tens of millions of tons. Their bodies were forcefully compressed into a ball less than 10 meters in diameter. What would that look like? What would that look like? But Chun Zhao was clearly not satisfied. He continued compressing the flesh and blood ball. Finally, a black ball appeared in Chun Zhao's hand. This black ball was compressed from the flesh and blood of a dozen Titans. No matter what it was, once it was compressed like this, it would turn black. Even the air was the same, let alone other colors. The black ball's surface was extremely smooth, as if it was the most perfect ball, but it was also the most dangerous ball. Seeing the black ball in Chun Zhao's hand, Ares felt a chill run down his spine. Instinctively, he wanted to run. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.